The Isle of Dagon is a tropical island that is located somewhere in the Pacific, on Earth Prime. I've been there once. That was after its occupant had vacated. The isle itself served as a prison of sorts. A prison for the most powerful, non-primordial being in all of existence. A being that was left there as a child. A baby. Left there to die by its own mother. Why, you may ask? Because he was simply too powerful. Dagon is what we refer to as a vessel being. A being of divine heritage, created to serve as an avatar for an even higher being. He was supposed to be an avatar for the most dangerous primordial in all of existence, aside from possibly Yahweh. If Yahweh represents free will and light, Amonu represents control and darkness. Dagon was created by Lucifer and Lilith for the dark god himself. He was created so that Amonu could unite all sentient life in darkness and peace as part of his collective. Or at least, that's what they say. How Dagon feels about this? I don't know. Or I didn't know when this story started. I stood in an elevator, my eyes locked on the silver-haired teenager who was standing next to me. I adjusted the collar of my suit as he fidgeted uncomfortably. "It's gonna be okay, Owen. He won't hurt you," I said. "It isn't me I'm worried about," he said as the elevator stopped with a ding. The doors opened, and we were greeted by a long concrete hallway. A guard stood with his hands on his belt. He smiled at us as we entered. "Welcome to the lowest level of sunshine. Ironically, it don't shine down here," he said in a southern accent. "Captain Gray, we spoke on the phone," I said. The elderly guard motioned his head to follow us. We walked down the hallway behind him and toward what looked like a glass doorway with 2 more guards standing on opposite sides. He doesn't get many guests. The ones he usually does get are kind of off. "Off?" I asked. Captain Gray shrugged. We were standing at the doorway. Inside, I could see a second door. He placed his keycard in a slot next to the door, and the glass slid up. He then walked to the next door. Once through it, I could see into the next room. Inside, there was a massive, cube-shaped cell, its walls all covered in warding. A man sat with his back against the wall. He had long blonde hair that went down to his shoulders. His inky black eyes locked onto Owen when he entered. He smiled as he leaned his head back. My eyes locked onto the stump where his arm used to be. "My boy," he said enthusiastically. Owen walked up to the cube and stopped, his hands in the pocket of his hoodie. "Lucifer?" Lucifer groaned. "Would it kill you to call me Dad?" he asked. Owen just stared at him. Lucifer laughed. Fine, I get it. I'm the devil after all. I'm the king of daddy issues." Lucifer got to his feet and looked down at Owen. It was then that I noticed that he was fairly tall, a whole hit taller than I was. "So I take it you're not here to have a social call with your pops," he said. "I'm here for information," Owen plainly stated. Yes, you want to know how to kill my eldest son, correct?" "As a matter of fact, I would," Owen said. Lucifer laughed. "You can't kill Dagon, not unless you let me take control." I could hear Owen's heartbeat accelerate at that comment. I had flashes of last time that had happened. Owen had nearly killed me, Marcus, and Aisha too. "You aren't taking control of shit," I barked. Lucifer's black eyes locked onto me. He sneered. "You let this ant speak for you?" Lucifer asked as he looked at Owen. "That ant is my friend. There has to be another way to beat Dagon." Lucifer eyed me again, then looked back at Owen. He spun around and rubbed his chin. Dagon. Dagon is Amonu's vessel. There isn't much that would kill him, but even if I knew a way, why would I tell you?" he asked. You won't get hell back if Dagon destroys it, I said. Lucifer shrugged. Why would I want hell back? Is that not why you created me? To take the throne back for you? Asked Owen. Lucifer groaned, almost like he was bored. I created you to avenge me. But I suppose you can't do that if you're dead. Lucifer thought for a moment. Dagon is the vessel of Amonu. Oh boy, the blood of Yahweh could work. Or more aptly, the blood of Christ. The Spear of Destiny? I asked. Lucifer shrugged. Darkness and light have an eternal struggle. It could work, but you'd have to find it first. Where is it? I asked. Lucifer shrugged. I wouldn't know. I've been locked up for most of the last 1,500 years. I bet my other son knows. Your other son? I asked. Yes, Abaddon, that little shit. He came to visit me yesterday. Said you'd swing by. He has a strange interest in you, Trent. If you listen to him talk, you'd swear he wanted to aggressively cuddle you. I rolled my eyes, then looked at Owen. I think we've got enough information, I said. Owen took a deep breath, then turned and started to walk away. I started to follow. Wait, Lucifer's voice said. I turned and looked at him. He smiled widely at me. You owe me. Maybe I'll have the guards throw in an extra cosmic brownie in your lunch, I said as I turned to walk out. I could hear Lucifer laughing as the glass door shut behind me. A few hours later, I found myself sitting in my office at base. I'd gone through file after file. Thus far, I hadn't found any useful information pertaining to the location of the Spear of Destiny. That was when a notification appeared on my laptop. I clicked it. An image of a newly found ally appeared. Marcus, how goes your lead on Mr. Armstrong? I asked. Marcus took a deep breath. I could see Sun Wukong operating the ship behind him. It seems Project New Dawn was a failure on this Earth, so he was assigned to something called Lightbringer. So he's not Amonu's bitch? I asked. Marcus chuckled. We don't know. Royce is trying to get into DARPA's Lightbringer's files. I'll let you know when we have an update. I sighed as I leaned back in my chair. Okay, I said. I sat in silent frustration for a minute. We'd been trying to find Dagon for months. For something so formidable, he sure liked to bide his time. Hell, I wasn't sure he was ever going to make a move. The only actual intel we'd gotten on him was from the Walker report, which brought a serious spotlight onto the current head of Gideon, Adrian Stein. I wasn't sure what the man was, but based on the Walker report, I knew he wasn't human. However, he also wasn't my current problem. Not yet. The lead we had in this report was a face. Mr. Walker, who wrote the report, described the body that had been taken over by Dagon as one Captain Samuel Hayward. I did some research on him. He'd owned a fishing vessel that had been sunk alongside a Coast Guard ship a few years prior. Official reports list it as a boating accident. As far as Walker went, he was currently MIA. However, I managed to find Hayward's account on the internet. It involves a zombie shark, which I've often wondered if this shark was the same one that Chad and Jamie killed during an escapade into an offshore Gideon facility a few months back. None of this matters, however. What does matter is that we're looking for Captain Hayward. We'd found his yacht on the Isle of Dagon. His face was in our system. We just had to locate him, if his meat suit was still around. I was lost in thought when there was a knock on the door. I looked up to see Ophelia standing there with her arms crossed. She wore a nice professional-looking red dress and had her hair tied back. Hey, I said calmly. Trent, why aren't you dressed? She asked. For what? I replied. The meeting with the Secretary of Defense? Wait, did you forget? She asked. I honestly had forgotten. I'd been caught up in this case for so long. Now, I don't know what Earth you're listening to this story on, but the US Secretary of Defense on Earth Prime was a former naval commander called Rear Admiral Helen Valentine. And yes, she had a rep for being as mean as a fucking snake. We'd been summoned to meet with her under threat of subpoena. I didn't like it, given that the ISDD was a private entity and that we existed outside the United States. She really had no say in how we operated. But nevertheless, my main concern was that we were using several classified military assets. I wanted to know if she was aware of them. And if she was she going to try and take them away? We met with her and CIA Deputy Director Ellen Jones, as well as the massive mountain of a man called General William Elliott at a small office in DC. The meeting was pretty cloak and dagger. By that I mean, it was small, just the 5 of us sitting around a table. Valentine held a remote to a projector display on the wall. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said. I looked at Ophelia, then at Ellen Jones. Jones had given us so much of the book's funding that it wasn't funny. He had a serious look plastered across his face. "What is this about?" I asked bluntly. Valentine looked at me over her glasses and tilted her head. "Well, I'm the new Secretary of Defense. It's my job to keep the American people safe and, well," she had a button. The first slide showed cell phone footage of us fighting in Norway against the horde of giants that had killed thousands. She hit a button again. This one showed the Lazarus mutants attacking Grozny. Another button, this time the riots in Hopper, California, the town Van Tippis had infected with the Lazarus. She hit the button again. I was suddenly shown footage of myself falling out the hotel room window in Texas. Everywhere you go, there seems to be an awful lot of collateral damage. Now, Jones and Elliot here do their best to sweep you guys under the rug. But they can't do that forever. Meaning, the United States government understands what you fight against. You people have fought things that none of us have ever thought imaginable. But there are some who think that you're not a necessity, that you've caused too much collateral damage, that these events only started because your sector was born. Are these people aware of the CIA's old SNOD unit? Jones asked. Valentine took a seat. Unfortunately, no, she said. They're just senators and politicians, most of which get their super PACs funded by your favorite drug manufacturer. They're unaware of the major battles fought by Pendragon. They're unaware that the things lurking in the darkness have such a rich history in this country's past. I looked at my watch. Valentine seemed to notice this. Do you have somewhere to be, Mr. Grayson? She asked. We're working a case with world-ending ramifications, so if you could cut to the point. Ophelia sharply interjected. Okay. Look, I'm gonna be very clear with you. There are government officials who want GSF on the front lines of these so-called problems. They want GSF doing your job, but everyone at this table knows Gideon's motives. I won't sugarcoat it. Problem is, they have too much power. I want them gone, but I can't do that myself. You people need an ally in the government before Gideon pays people off to wipe you out. Meaning? I asked. I'm offering you my assistance. Ophelia and I looked at each other. You know taking sides against Gideon is a massive risk, right? Asked Ophelia. My son was a Navy SEAL. You worked with him at Grozny. A Gideon bioweapon killed him. Let me be clear. I will do my best to keep the politicians at bay, but only if you people can try to limit collateral damage. You're one destroyed city away from the entire world coming down on you. I could hear General Elliot exhale. The entire world. What would the world do without them? He asked. Valentine shrugged. You know how politics are. They want to put the blame wherever they can. I'll do my best to keep it off of you, but I need you guys to help me take out Gideon. We will, I said. But right now, we have another problem. Yes, Jones informed me about this. Dagon, is it? She took a deep breath. GSF is searching for him too, on behalf of the US government. She pulled a file from a briefcase and tossed it onto the table. I'll keep in touch, she said as she got up and left. Was GSF's intel useful? Not really. But it was nice to know that we had the support of the Secretary of Defense. We would teleport back to base, where we would meet with Abel and a meek-looking man in a suit. A man with scraggly black hair and a short beard. A man called Kane. You must be the Centurion's descendant," Kane greeted. I can remember kind of groaning at the comment, but I had more pressing concerns than my pride. "I understand you're looking for the Spear of Destiny," Kane said. "You got any leads?" Kane shrugged. "Perhaps. Abel tells me you've crossed paths with my son, Jonathan Crowley." "We did, early on, although I didn't realize he was your son." "Yeah, we're what you modern humans refer to as estranged. Anyway, he specializes in gathering artifacts, as you know. He may have some insight as to where it is." I thought about this for a moment. Crowley had served as a middleman for Gideon for a while, but ever since we torched his warehouse, he'd vanished. I wasn't sure if we had the time to waste when we needed to find Dagon, which was better said than done, but we needed a spear. "Where is Crowley?" I asked. Kane looked at Abel. "Right now, I have no clue, but my agent says he's been trying to get his hands on a key to Olympus." "A key to Olympus?" I asked with a raised brow. "Yeah, it's Atlantean tech, exactly as it sounds. And I know exactly where one is," Kane said with a smile. We made our plans next. I didn't want to scare Crowley. Kane's agent also specialized in gathering artifacts, but he was more the stealing type. I'd meet him alone. I didn't know exactly who he was. Abel refused to give me the details, which had me kind of irritated. I was to meet the contact at a hotel in Sicily. I arrived in my civilian clothes. My suit would be on standby in the Wasp that we'd landed on the roof. Not that it mattered. This was just a meeting. I will admit, the bar wasn't nearly as picturesque as one would think. It was very basic. I walked in and ordered a shot of whiskey, putting my finger to my earpiece. "You gonna tell me who this guy is now?" I asked. "If I did that, you wouldn't take the meeting," Abel replied. "So what, have I met them before?" I looked around the bar for familiar faces, but admittedly, I recognized absolutely no one. Then, a voice came from behind me. "Mr. Grayson, you look a lot better than the last time I saw you." I could feel my heart rate escalate when I heard the voice. I remembered that voice, from a tunnel in Athens. I turned to the man. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, an eye patch on his face. The leader of the Loxley gang smirked. You're Kane's contact?" I demanded, realizing why Abel hadn't told me. This dude had shot me with an arrow, a poison one too. I spent almost a week in the hospital because of him. I wanted to pull my pistol and shoot this man in his remaining eye, but decided against it. Loxley sat next to me at the bar. "I needed an artifact. You were in my way. It wasn't personal," he said. I didn't respond. The bartender poured him a shot, and he dumped it into his throat. "So, I have a meet set up with Crowley a few hours from now." "Where?" I asked. First we drink." "I'm not drinking with you." "Why not?" "Do I really need to answer that question?" Loxley shrugged. "I told you it wasn't personal." I rolled my eyes and ordered a drink. The bartender poured me a shot of vodka that honestly should have burned more as it went down. I turned back to him. "Happy now?" He stared at me for a second or two before speaking. "Crowley and I have a business arrangement. I give him the artifact. He pays me." "I know how Crowley's business works," I stated. "I am aware you burned down his warehouse before. Do you know how much stuff he lost during that incident? You're lucky you work for his uncle, or he'd have you killed. Anywho, the meet will be right here tomorrow morning. Stay cloaked, and don't engage," Loxley said. Now the thief was giving me orders. I ordered another shot. I wanted to deck him in his face. I wasn't too fond of the man already. I calmed myself for a second. "And you think he'll give you the information willingly?" "Maybe if I knock some of the price off of the key." "And if he doesn't?" Loxley shrugged. "Go nuts. You'll have to get past his bodyguard though." "His bodyguard?" "Yeah, it'll be fine, I think." About 10 hours later, I was in my suit and sitting in a booth. It was early morning, so the bar wasn't very occupied. I was cloaked, Not a soul could see me. I watched Locksley closely as he sat at a table directly ahead of me. He had some circular, electronic-looking device that he was spinning at the table. I groaned under my breath. Why did it have to be with him? I muttered to myself. He has what we need. It'll be fine, Trent. Abel's voice replied. That was when the door opened. Into the bar walked the familiar visage of Jonathan Crowley, dressed head to toe in a black suit and holding a dark briefcase. His eyes landed on Locksley as he walked straight up to him. My eyes locked onto the man who had walked in behind him. One my suit scanned. The man's body was covered in warding. It also wasn't made from flesh. What is that? I asked. The man moved to a table and sat down, his face and eyes devoid of any kind of emotion. That's a golem. Must be Crowley's bodyguard, Abel said. My gaze went back to Locksley and Crowley. Crowley placed the briefcase on the table. Here's your money. I assume that's the key you're playing with? You're the expert. Is that all of it? Mr. Locksley, I'm a man of my word. Are you now? Locksley said as he slid the key over. I am. I do have another bit of business I wanted to ask you about, Locksley stated. Crowley turned his head to the side. And what's that? The Spear of Destiny. I'm flattered that you think I have it. No, I don't, but I do think you know where it is. Crowley smirked. That may or may not be true. How much? Locksley asked. Crowley sighed as he thought for a moment. Then his eyes landed on me. You're just gonna sit there? He asked. My eyes grew large as I uncloaked. As I did, the golem shot to its feet. Crowley motioned for it to stop. Nemesis, I thought that was you. You cost me a pretty penny, you know that? Crowley asked. I shrugged. Cost of business. Crowley nodded as he considered this. Well, I assume you need the spear to deal with Dagon, or try to deal with Dagon at least. Tell me, have you located the Mad Messiah yet? I didn't reply. I thought not. Tell you what, I'll give you the location of the spear free of charge. Nothing's ever free, Locksley said. Crowley shrugged. Can't deal in artifacts if the world's destroyed. But that being said, you are correct. I'll tell you where it is if you give a message to my father for me. What's that? I asked. Crowley smirked. He pulled a rolled up letter from his jacket and tossed it to me. I caught it. Give him that. He'll know what to do. Okay, now where's the spear? I asked. In an underground Gideon facility called The Pit. You know it? He asked. I took a deep breath. When Jamie had switched sides, he and Chad had gotten onto a Gideon server and stolen a shit ton of information. The Pit was just a small sliver. What I knew of it was that it was in the middle of the desert in Arizona and protected by an entire battalion of GSF. The Pit was where Gideon conducted tests of a more supernatural nature. I knew they had skinwalkers, wendigos, vampires, and even a demonically mutated dinosaur on site. I wasn't sure if they were out or not. I'd remembered my last encounter with a skinwalker. I wasn't looking forward to another. A few hours later, I was standing in the ISDD base control room with Ophelia and Abel. I had my arms crossed. Some of the computer monitors on the walls had overhead images of the pit, or the canyon it was built into. Others had images of Captain Hayward, who had been spotted during my meetup with Locksley. He'd been spotted in a village in Spain. I stood there, knowing full well that I had to make a decision. Either go after the spear, or go after a lead on Dagon. But we couldn't do the first one if we had no reliable way to kill him. That and if the reports from the keepers were right, Dagon could possibly infect someone with his influence with a simple touch. Or so we'd been led to believe. What's the plan? Ophelia asked. We don't know if Hayward is worshipping Dagon of his own free will, or if he's just someone who's been infected. So, until we have the spear, making a move is unwise. Yes, but he's in a populated area. If we try to quarantine it, he'll blow right through our defenses, Abel said. We need the spear. We also need eyes on. We gotta make sure he doesn't spread, Ophelia said. So take the team, keep an eye on him. Locksley and I will go after the spear, I said. Abel eyed me. Are you sure? You about wanted to kill him this morning. I did want to kill him, but he's the best thief in the world. If anyone can steal this thing, it's him. Abel nodded. I looked at Ophelia. Remember, this is surveillance only. Don't engage. Ophelia nodded. Terrell is already on site. I'll take Megan, Thomas, and Chad and meet up with him. What about Owen? Asked Abel. He stays here for now. Aisha and the Lightbenders can keep an eye on him. Lord knows he needs their training. Kid's a good fighter, but we don't need soldiers right now. We need spies, I said. Abel nodded. Fair enough. I took a deep breath. I'd updated the Hell Hunters on our plans. They still hadn't found anything else on John Armstrong, but they had gotten the coordinates of the testing site for Project Lightbringer. They were headed there. Ophelia got the team prepped within the next couple of hours. I can remember that by the time they were ready to leave, Locksley had brought his team onto base and began prepping themselves. I stood by the hangar bay with Ophelia as my team boarded the Wasp. It was noisy in there. Miguel had a crew of men working on his newest science project, which was a Transformers-sized mech suit he called the Devastator. More on that bit of foreshadowing later. It was a time for saying goodbyes. I admit I was terrified for her, but this part of the job needed to be done. Remember, don't engage, I said. Ophelia smiled at me in a way only she could. I heard you the first time, she said before hugging me. I took a deep breath. I'd actually been planning on something special for her for the last few months. Ever since I'd come back to work, I'd lost so much over the past year, and the world had changed so much. I didn't know if I wanted to waste any more time with it. When all of this is over, there's something we need to talk about, I said to her. She smiled and kissed me. Let's focus on saving the world first, she said, before turning and walking up the Wasp's back ramp. I turned back to where Locksley was standing and waiting for me. He smirked. Then he handed me a tablet. This is everything my guys got on the pit. I looked down at the first picture on the tablet and almost immediately wanted to break it over my knee. Oh, for fuck's sake, I groaned. He's been on the site. He undoubtedly knows the ins and outs, Locksley said. He shot me, I said. Locksley scoffed. So did I. I grumbled as I looked at the image of Jamie as he directed some GSF soldiers at the facility. Jamie had killed me. He'd shot me in my back 6 times and in the chest several more. I still had the scars across my chest. Don't get me wrong, Jamie had switched sides during our incident with Lilith. He'd switched sides because Gideon had asked him to massacre a village in Somalia using a Lazarus canister, which he refused. They detonated it anyway and framed him for it. I won't defend Jamie here. He helped Victor Marks deploy a canister in Grozny. He'd done several awful things in his stint with Gideon. I didn't trust him, but he came to us seeking help. He and Chad had gained a lot of intel in GSF. Valuable intel. Here lay another chance for him to earn a little more of our trust. I didn't like it at all. We'd kept Jamie in the barracks with Takeshi and several soldiers. The base was underground on the island, and there was a pseudo neighborhood above it, which was where most of us actually lived. The barracks were in the underground base though. It was either keep Jamie there, or in a cell in the icebox in the lowest level. That was a hot debate. Takeshi had been keeping an eye on him for the last few weeks, and was now heading towards Spain, so I guess it was my turn to babysit. We arrived in Arizona a few hours before sunup. I'd originally thought that Locksley's team was going to be accompanying us on the op, but the only one who came was an older man called Rat Watts, who Locksley introduced as a former bank robber that ended up being forced to play an even more fucked up version of the most dangerous game with the rogue Greek goddess Artemis. The pit had been built into the side of a cliff basin. It looked like a massive bunker from the outside. Only This bunker was a 27-level facility full of labs and whatever monstrosities Gideon had in store for us. We teleported a few miles away from the facility. Jamie had explained to us that it was warded to hell. He'd also explained that there were drones patrolling the area that could sense any vehicles we'd brought with us, which meant that we would be lagging the journey, which wasn't an issue. I had my suit. Loxley was an immortal with magic arrows. Jamie was a super soldier, and Watts had survived rogue gods. We also brought our mini drones, which had feet that connected to my suit's HUD. Abel had warned us that us teleporting in would attract attention to that sector. We had to get a move on quickly after we landed. It was surprisingly chilly. My HUD read that it was 62 degrees outside. We began the 5-mile hike, the wind gently blowing sand across the dunes around us, the full moon guiding our path. Loxley sent a trio of drones up. Their feet appeared on my HUD. We walked in silence for a bit. "So, you and Ophelia, everyone knows now?" Jamie said softly. "Yeah, everyone knew before," I replied. "Oh." We walked in silence for a few more minutes. "Even Shaw?" Jamie asked. "Shaw knew. He just didn't say anything." Jamie scoffed a bit at that. "Figures. He never did follow his own rules." I kept walking. I could see the canyon in the distance. Loxley was out ahead of us, Watts taking up the rear. "We're coming up on Zone 2, Jamie said sternly. I pulled my sword. If memory served me right, Zone 2 was protected by a skinwalker. "Loxley," I said. He pulled an arrow from his quiver and knocked it. I could see that a GSF patrol was already investigating the area we had teleported in through a drone feed. It was officially too late to turn back now. My suit scanned for life forms. All I found was a few lizards and a rat. At least for the moment. I wondered what form the skinwalker was going to take first, if they'd try to screw with me like the last one had. That question was answered when I saw Loxley tense up atop a sand dune. He had his bow aimed. I walked up behind him. "What is it?" "There." My HUD spotted it. The woman sitting next to a small fire. She was definitely native, but she wore modern clothing. She was also young. The last skinwalker I'd killed looked like a crone. My HUD scanned her. She reeked of several types of magic. Blood, black, all of it. "Why is she just sitting there?" Loxley asked. I didn't know. "Stay here," I said as I walked past him. "Don't do anything stupid, mate," Loxley said. I approached cautiously. The skinwalker poked and prodded at the fire. "Trent Grayson, oh how the spirits talk about you." "I've heard that before," I said. She sniffed the air. "You brought friends." I tightened my grip on my sword handle. "You feeling uneasy?" she asked as she turned and smiled at me. She was a lot prettier than I was expecting. I only looked down at her. "You ever wonder what the spirits say about you?" "Nothing good, I'd imagine." "Heh, Trent Grayson, Nemesis, leader of the ISDD and slayer of Vlad Tepes. But not just Vlad Tepes, but hundreds, maybe thousands of others. I mean, what do you use to wipe off all the blood on your hands?" "Dawn works alright," I said. She laughed again. "You're a funny man. Tell me, did you give my grandmother this much sass when you killed her?" "The skinwalker from Alaska? That was your grandmother? She never mentioned you," I asked. She laughed again. I could see her skin start to ripple and morph. Her physical form morphed into one resembling Rick Grayson. I was suddenly staring into the face of my father. "Would you like to know what your father's spirit says about you?" it said in his voice. I rolled my eyes. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this spiel. I've done it once already." An arrow flew over my shoulder and planted itself into her throat. Her eyes bulged as her hands shot to it. Her eyes landed on me, then on the approaching Loxley. She smiled at him. "Robin Locksley," she gasped. "Still Kane's bitch, I see." "Luna?" Jamie greeted from behind Locksley. "You know her?" I asked. "By reputation, she's George Stapleton's number 2, Jamie said. "Stein has big plans for you, Jamie," she said as she slowly pulled the arrow out. I ignited my sword and took a step forward, but she vanished before I could do so. I stood there by the fire. I looked back at Locksley. "George Stapleton, as in Gideon's head of security?" I asked. "I wasn't sure until we approached her," Jamie said. "They're gonna come looking for us, and soon. The protocol for ISDD is half the on-site garrison," Jamie said. "Fuck," I replied. That was when we heard an earth-shattering bang. I looked up into the sky. My HUD picked up on it first. The mortar shells that were coming our way. "We've got incoming!" I shouted. Jamie and Watts hit the deck. Lexley pulled an arrow and fired it into the sky. There was a flash. Then, several bright fireballs lit up the night sky. We needed to move. We needed to get out of the hot zone. I could see the incoming garrison on my HUD. There were 3 to 4 APCs, all loaded with soldiers. They were between us and the cliffside. "Worst heist I've ever been a part of," Locksley said. "What do we do?" asked Jamie. "We can't risk the spear," I said. "We can't." I could hear Locksley groan. "Alright then, Watts, you still have that Atlantean cloaking device we nicked from Olympus?" he asked. "Yup." "Give it to Jamie," he said. Watts pulled his backpack off and reached into it. It took a second or two of rummaging around before he pulled out another device. This one looked like a black electronic cloak. He handed it to Jamie. "Stole this from Hades' vault," he said. "Is that all?" I asked. Watts raised a brow. "I took a shit in Artemis's bed." Locksley chuckled and pulled an arrow. "Get cloaked and go. We'll exfil when you've gotten inside." "Don't screw us," I said. Locksley smirked. Jamie put the cloak on. I hit the cloaking device on my suit. Jamie and I vanished just as the APC's spotlights crested the sand dunes ahead of us. We would walk past the APCs as they opened fire. We made our way to the cliffside, the gunfight raging behind us. All we had to do now was follow the cliff to the bunker entrance. The cloaking devices enabled us to walk straight up to the bunker's front door. It looked like your basic bunker on the outside, with a thick concrete sliding door that blended in almost seamlessly with the cliffside. It had been colored in a way to match the sand-colored rock. The entrance was wide open, and there were military vehicles shuffling out, in response to us, no doubt. The area ahead of the doorway was crawling with GSF. My HUD could also detect that it was also covered in warding. "We aren't making it in there easily, invisible or not," I said. "I know. Please tell me there's another doorway." "There is at the top of the cliff. It's a back entrance, but you're not going to like it." "Why?" "It leads into the garden." "What's in the garden?" I asked. "Frank." "Who's Frank?" "The Demon Rex." I'd remembered it from the files. I groaned under my breath. "I guess we're going rock climbing," I said. We did exactly that. We climbed the cliff face. I could hear Luna yelling at the soldiers below us. I could hear her screaming into her radio. "Send everyone if you have to. It's 4 fucking guys. Are you telling me we can't kill 4 fucking guys?" she shouted. I got a peek at my HUD. The drone feed showed probably 30 or 40 bodies that had arrows in them. The APCs were all trashed, although I couldn't see Locksley and Watts. Jamie and I continued our climb. We scaled all 800 or so feet before we reached the top. It was empty, weirdly empty. It was also quiet. "Wait," I said as I brought my fist up. "What?" Jamie asked. "I don't like this." I could see directly ahead of us was a small doorway. It was wide open. I could see the light from inside the facility. I could also hear a clicking sound. It was semi-guttural. "Jamie, what's up here?" I asked. That sounds like a... Jamie was interrupted by a loud screech. My eyes locked onto the Wendigo as it barreled through the doorway and straight toward us. I charged it, sword ready. It leapt at me with its talons outstretched. I loped its hands off before shoving my blade into its chest. I turned and looked at Jamie. I don't know where that came from. We'd known there were Wendigo on site. We didn't know for sure where they were. Jamie had told us in our pre-mission briefing that they were typically locked up. I looked down at the creature. Its milky white body was frail and lanky. I could see its ribs. I could also see a tattoo on its neck. It was labeled 003. Shit. What? Asked Jamie. Let's hope the others aren't out. We cautiously approached the doorway ahead of us. It led into a metal stairway that led down into what looked like an artificial forest. I say looked like. It was an artificial forest. It was referred to as the garden. It originally was where Victor Marx grew some of the enhanced plants that helped him create the Easy Pill. But it's been converted into a holding pen. Or maybe something more akin to a zoo enclosure for the demon Rex called Frank. I stayed cloaked. Jamie did as well. We reached the bottom of the stairs to find the barred doorway wide open and the grass beyond covered in puddles of blood. I knelt beside the blood as my hut examined it. What happened here? Asked Jamie. My hut rang up a match on the blood's DNA. It belonged to a vampire. A particular vampire that we hadn't dealt with in a while. Moria Tippis. A cascade of thoughts shot through my brain. What was she doing here? Was she after the spear? Why was she breaking in? Or was she breaking out? Let's keep moving, I said. We started moving through the foliage ahead of us. Jamie led the way as he'd been in this pen before. On the way up, he'd mentioned that the Demon Rex had an electric implant that kept it docile and cooperative. I wasn't so sure, especially with all that blood. It didn't take long for us to reach the pen's entrance. There was a small clearing between us and the glass. Only issue was that Luna was standing there in the doorway with the remote control in one hand. Oh, and the massive fucking red T-Rex that was looking down at us. Luna was flanked on either side by soldiers. Soldiers that were wheeling off a blunt woman that was now strapped to a gurney. Luna's back was to us. It looked as if the blonde woman had taken advantage of the chaos outside and tried to escape. I could also see 2 of the soldiers had 2 Wendigo unleashes. Those were just my quick observations before I stared up into the black eyes of the dinosaur. Keep in mind, we were still cloaked. You think it can see us? Jamie asked. Yup. Why? The Wendigo did, I said. Touché. I tightened my grip on my sword. I could see Luna closing the door to the pen. She looked aggravated. She turned to give more orders, but I couldn't hear them beyond the glass. The dinosaur tilted its head at us, almost as if it was curious. What do we do? Jamie asked. How the fuck should I know? I'm not Alan Grant. I didn't want to fight this thing with its masters just outside. Hell, I didn't want to fight this thing at all. My suit, however, had already registered this thing's implant. It had already begun trying to find its signal when I'd first looked at it. It found the signal, and a prompt appeared on my HUD. A prompt whose options said sleep, shock, and adrenaline. The first 2 sounded like fun options. The last one, not so much. The dinosaur took a step towards us. Sleep, I barked. The Demon Rex suddenly fell over with a loud thud. I almost laughed. Jamie cocked his head to one side. How'd you do that? He asked. I hacked its implant. Now, let's go. We moved about the facility. Guards were moving around frantically. We kept our distance from Luna and her troop. I wasn't sure if I should try and rescue the blonde woman or not. I knew it was Moria's Tippis, but we needed that spear. Where does the facility keep its valuables? I asked. On the bottom level. We gotta get to the elevator. The facility was surprisingly clean. Most of the walls were made from black marble and lined with bright lights that were flickering. We passed more glass cells. I saw some Wendigo locked in one, a naked vampire in another. We walked right past the black wolf that was as large as a horse. Then finally, we came across the cell where Luna and her men were loading Moria up onto what looked like a torture rack. Moria looked battered and bloody. She had dried blood smeared across her face. Her white dress was torn and blood-stained. I could smell it from the hallway. "You're going to tell me exactly what your little friends are planning, or I'm going to shove this silver knife somewhere you really won't like." "Do your worst," Moria growled. I could hear Luna laugh. Then I could hear Moria scream. We'd walked past them. Luna was yanking a knife out of Moria's thigh. I grunted. "Shit," said Jamie. "Keep moving." "Are you sure?" "The spear comes first," I said as I took 2 more steps. That was when another scream came from the room. I stopped and groaned, then hit the button on my wrist. It was the button for my suit's EMP device. All the lights in the corridor cut out. I turned and walked into the room with my sword in hand. The room was large, maybe the size of a bedroom. The torture rack looked almost like a cross. Moria's arms were outstretched and tied off with silver garrote wire. I cut down 2 of Luna's guards in the dark before she turned and raised her hand. I was sent flying through the cell window, my cloaking device turned off. I got to my feet in a hurry and glared at her. Luna was standing at the cell doorway now, her eyes blazing in a white-hot fury. "Loxley killed 50 of my men." I ignited my sword. "We're about to kill a whole lot more," I said. Luna went to raise her hand. There was a loud crack. Luna's brains were blown from her skull. Jamie stood there with a smoking revolver. Luna fell to the ground. Jamie turned to me. "What are those bullets made from?" I asked. "You remember Victor marks?" Jamie asked. "Yeah." Jamie holstered the revolver. I melted most of his spare armor and weapons down. I nodded, mainly because I didn't think that Jamie was that smart. I grunted under my breath. I knew Gideon's security would be here any second. Jamie and I cut Moria down quickly. She laughed softly when she saw us. "I knew you liked me," Moria groaned. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Gideon, captured, bounty," she grunted. I could hear the boots of the soldiers now. There was no way we were getting her out alive. Not without the other side effect of my EMP device turning off all electronics. I could hear the screech. Then, the shattering of glass. Gunfire rang out. There was a loud screech. Then a snarl. "Let's go," I shouted. We limped with Moria into the hallway, where a bloody display of violence was going on. I didn't have time to sit and watch. The backup generators kicked back on with a loud hum, but the battle behind us didn't cease. We made it to the elevator door, and Jamie hit the button. The elevator dinged. The door opened. We shuffled inside. I looked at the holographic keypad ahead of me and reached out to hit the button for the lowest level, which was labeled with the number 1. "Wait," Jamie said as he reached out and hit the number 43. "What are you doing?" "Level 1 is a misdirection. It drops you into a giant pen." I looked at him for a moment. He shrugged. "We were worried about people stealing shit." "You have a giant here?" "Not anymore. He choked on someone and died." I wanted to roll my eyes. Both Jamie and I had uncloaked at this point. Moria was leaning on the back wall of the elevator. It moved slowly. You were really gonna leave her behind back there?" Jamie asked. "We need that spear," I reiterated. "But you turned around. For a second there I thought, you thought what, Jamie? That I was gonna be like you were?" I said sharply. Jamie looked at the floor. I could hear him take a deep breath. "I'm trying, Trent. I am. I know you still don't trust me. You probably never will." He took a deep breath. "It feels good being on the right side." "Well, that's just touching. Now, if you two are done with your lover's quarrel, I need some blood, or I'm going to perish from my wounds, Moria groaned. You can't have mine. It'll kill you, I said without looking at her. Same here, even though my serum was great value, Jamie said. I could hear Moria groan. She sounded weak. The elevator door dinged and then opened. There was suddenly a man standing there with an assault rifle aimed at us. Jamie put his hands up. I was in my suit, so bullets were the least of my problems. I looked the guard up and down. Drop your weapons, he commanded as he waved his rifle. Will that work? I asked. Oh yeah, Moria snarled. There was a sudden blur of white that flew out of the elevator and onto the guard. He didn't even get the chance to scream before her mouth was around his throat. Jamie and I exited the elevator as Moria greedily slurped up the man's blood. We found ourselves in what looked like a massive warehouse with rows upon rows of crates, all containing various artifacts and items of value to GSF and Gideon. Where would the spear be? I asked. If I were to guess, I'd say in Stein's vault. Oh great, CEO of the Umbrella ripoff has his own vault, I grumbled to myself. Jamie led the way as we ran between two massive rows of shelves. We ran the length of the warehouse when we came across what looked like a massive black bank vault. My HUD scanned it. The thing was covered in warding. It also gave off a strange energy signature, one that seemed familiar. Jamie stood next to the keypad. He entered a code. The keypad flashed red. He entered another. Red again. Jamie, what's taking so long? I asked. I'm just trying to remember the code, Jamie replied. We didn't have time for this. We knew we didn't have time for this. Moria stalked past me, the guard's keycard in her hand. She scanned it on the keypad, and the door clicked. That was when the thought hit me. Why was there only one guard down here? And, of all the ones we could encounter first, why did that one have a keycard to Adrian Stein's, the CEO of Gideon's vault? Jamie pushed the heavy metal door open. I pulled my sword and readied it. My heart nearly jumped into my throat when I saw what was inside the vault. Jamie took a few steps back in what I could only describe as fear. Standing there, with his hands in his pockets, was Adrian fucking Stein. My HUD went absolutely fucking ballistic when it locked onto him. Wardings, demonic energy, blood magic, black magic, every icon imaginable went off. He tilted his head as he looked at us. Well, I was wondering when you were going to show up. You know, if you wanted something of mine, you should have just asked. I readied my sword. Ah, he said as he raised his hand. I was suddenly yanked through the air and into the vault. Jamie stepped forward, but slammed into an invisible barrier. Moria ran. That fucking coward. The inside of Adrian's vault was adorned like an old-fashioned office, with several bookshelves and a massive wooden desk. There was a red carpet that looked to have been made with the fur of some kind of massive beast. There was a fireplace that was just roaring between the bookshelves. I found myself plopped down in front of Stein's desk. He was leaning next to it, fiddling with an old spear tip. You can take off the helmet, Trent. I'm not going to hurt you. If I was, I'd have done it when you and Loxley teleported in. Your people try to kill us, I argued. Stein shrugged. They were doing their jobs. Besides, Gideon has the best life insurance policies for our employees. Don't get me wrong, most of their souls end up in hell, but you know, what can you do? He said as he swung the spear point through the air with a slight whoosh. What are you? You're not human, I demanded. Look at you, asking questions and expecting answers without even acquiescing my request. I gritted my teeth and took my helmet off. The room smelled of burning logs. Stein loomed over me for a minute. Trent fucking Grayson, we finally meet. You know, I've been watching you for a while. What, you got some kind of crush? I asked. No, nothing of the sort. But I know a little bit about things, like destiny, how ours are intertwined. You and I will do great things together. Are you trying to recruit me into your fucking world-ending cabal? You people work for hell, I said. Adrian winced. I could feel his power radiating around me. The pressure holding me to the sofa increased slightly. The denizens of hell prefer the term Gehennian. And no, on the contrary, I want us to stay enemies. I mean, as fun as being friends would be, my side wants to rule the cosmos. And yours, well, is in my way. However, he started as he held up the spear tip. We don't have to be enemies in this moment. What are you getting at? Dagon, of course, you knucklehead, he said as he ruffled my hair. I forced his hand away roughly. He smirked. What, you just gonna give us the spear? What's the catch? Why go through the trouble of letting us break in? Adrian clicked his tongue. Yes, I am going to just give you the spear. Like I said, my side wants the cosmos, and we can't have it if there is no cosmos. And as far as the catch, well, there is a price for everything. But I'm, how can I put this? Feeling a bit generous. There's always a catch, I said. Oh, there will be, don't you worry. That, however, is the least of your concerns. You need to focus on saving the world before Dagon turns everyone on Earth Prime into his own sushi dish, he said as he tossed the spear tip into my lap. It was old. The metal was partially rusted. What's to stop me from using this on you? I asked. Destiny. Now, run along. Tell Owen I said hi. I wanted to get up and shove the spear into his throat. Every muscle in my body was screaming. But he simply snapped his fingers, and I was outside the vault with Jamie. Jamie looked at me wide-eyed. I looked down at the spear with my hood. The 2,000-year-old blood on it gave off a powerful energy, one that was labeled unidentifiable by my heads-up display. I looked back up, and Stein had vanished. The fire was out. I turned back to Jamie. Let's go. We followed our steps back to the elevator, where I'd put my helmet back on, and we would go back to the top floor. I wasn't sure where Moria had gone. Admittedly, I didn't really care. Jamie and I both cloaked in the elevator. We knew there'd been a fight raging on the top floor. A fight between the creatures and their masters. We didn't want to be seen. Don't get me wrong, our cloaking systems aren't perfect. The Wendigo could smell us. The Demon Rex could somewhat see us. Although Abel says it could more see our outlines, and it confused the creature. The elevator door dinged. The silver doors opened. I stepped out into the hallway. Two Wendigos were playing tug-of-war with a man's entrails. Jamie and I slipped by. The hallway was a bloodbath in the very literal sense. Blood spatter painted the walls. There were body parts everywhere. We made our way past cell after cell until we made it back to the Demon Rex enclosure. There was a massive T-Rex-sized hole in the glass. Blood stained the floor. We were just about to enter when I heard a loud thud. Then another. Then another. I exhaled shakily as I turned around. The red-skinned dinosaur was staring down at us again. This time, its eyes were glowing red. It remembered us from last time. It roared. The coppery tang of blood on its breath was potent. I couldn't disable it with this implant now, as my EMP had shut it off. Oh shit. I heard Jamie grumble as he grabbed his revolver. I pulled my sword and decloaked. The T-Rex tilted its head, then took 2 steps forward as it turned its whole body, its tail snapping in my direction. I jumped over it, but barely. The creature turned back toward me and snapped at me with its jaws. I sidestepped and slashed it. It howled in pain as its crimson eye was gashed from its head. That was when I heard the chittering, the noise of clattering claws on the concrete racing towards us. I turned to see both Wendigos racing our direction on all fours. There was a gunshot. One of the Wendigo went down with a bullet hole in its forehead. It wasn't the heart. The Wendigo got back up. I didn't have time to comprehend this, as the distraction had gotten me whacked in the back by the dinosaur's tail. I was sent flying through what was left of the glass and into the pen. I shut up, the dinosaur roaring as it followed me in. I pulled the grenade and popped the pin off with my thumb. The dinosaur was on me now, his jaws coming down at me. I tossed the grenade into his mouth and rolled to the side. The explosion went off. The dinosaur roared in pain. I was on my feet now, looking at the dinosaur as it breathed a small cloud of black smoke. The grenade had done absolutely nothing. The creature roared again. I could hear gunfire and snarling from the hallway. Jamie didn't have armor. If those Wendigo were to get a hold of him, he would be dead as hell. Between he and I stood a very angry dinosaur. I readied my sword again. The dinosaur stomped as it came forward, only to be suddenly intercepted by a mass of black fur. The hellhound had come flying from the back stairwell and had leapt onto the Demon Rex's back. Its teeth sank into the creature's back. They didn't penetrate, but the T-Rex was distracted. I made my move, sprinting forward and slashing my sword at one of the demon dinosaur's feet. I lopped it off, and the creature fell to the side. Its black blood soaked the grass in its enclosure. The wolf was thrown off, and it hit the ground hard. The dinosaur screeched and roared as it struggled. I didn't give it a chance to get its bearings though. I leapt onto its neck and buried my sword up to the hilt in its throat. I didn't have time to bask as I could hear Jamie roar in pain. I turned and started to run out into the hallway, where I found Jamie bloodied and holding a gash on his side. A dead Wendigo on the ground below him. He looked forward and reloaded his revolver. Another Wendigo was circling. It was covered in bullet holes. All had missed the heart. I sped up and collided with the Wendigo. We went to the ground in a tangle of metal and claws. I found myself on top, bringing my sword down onto the creature's heart. It squealed as it died. I stood up. Jamie had fallen to a knee. My hut scanned him. He had deep gashes on his side and across his back. He was hurt pretty bad. I ran over and helped him up, putting my sword onto my back as I did so. "We gotta go," I said as I turned. A dozen or so GSF soldiers were filing into the hallway. My eyes grew large. I pulled the pistol from my hip and fired. They returned fire. It was a short exchange. Their bullets hit my armor. Jamie was hit in the thigh. He grunted in pain as I started to pull him into the pen. We were making a break for the back stairway, only to be cut off by the hellhound. Fuck, I'd forgotten about the hellhound. It glared at me. I raised my pistol at it. It tilted its head. I realized then that my pistol would do me no good, so I gently let Jamie down and pulled my sword. The beast looked behind me and snarled at the soldiers as they rounded the corner. I turned and fired my pistol at the soldiers. One or two went down. More soldiers filed in. I was expecting the wolf to attack me from behind, but I was wary about a stray bullet hitting Jamie. But the wolf never came at me. Instead, I caught Jamie suddenly get yanked from beside me from the corner of my eye. I turned with my sword raised, the bullets dinging off of my armor, only to see the wolf pulling Jamie by the back of his shirt towards the stairs. Shit! I growled as I started to run after them. That was when I was hit in the back with what I think was a grenade launcher. It didn't do any damage, but it did cause me to lose my balance for a second. I stumbled forward. The hellhound had pulled a screaming Jamie most of the way up the stairs. I got to my feet and followed. By the time I got into the top of the stairs, the hellhound was sitting next to Jamie and sniffing him. I readied my sword to fight this thing, but it only tilted its head at me. "Let him go," I commanded, knowing full well this thing couldn't understand me. It looked down at Jamie, then me. I raised my pistol again. "Wait!" a voice called out. It took me a second to realize the voice had come from my comms device. I looked up, just as the Keeper's ship uncloaked behind it, its entrance ramp open, revealing Marcus standing there without his helmet. He had his hands up. "Don't shoot the dog, Trent. It's Duke." "Duke?" I asked. The wolf turned and walked straight up to Marcus, who gave it a gentle pet before letting it walk past him. "He's one of ours." I lowered my gun. I didn't like this. I'd read about Duke in the Pendragon files. I'd also heard a reference to him in the report that was submitted to us by that Walker guy. Marcus and I pulled Jamie into their ship, where we found Wukong, Circe, and Royce at their respective stations. The wolf walked calmly to a corner and sat down right next to Loxley, who smiled at me. "I take it you're done chasing Armstrong?" I asked as we handed Jamie off to Circe. Circe started to try and stabilize him with her magic. "We found Project Lightbringer. It's a ship." "Where'd you find it?" I asked. "In a certain pyramid, in Crawford. Looks like it's been there for a while." "Any sign of Armstrong?" I asked. "No, either he was eaten by a dragon, or he just isn't there." "Shit. Let's get Jamie to the hospital. I need to contact Ophelia and see how our lead is going." We arrived in the sky above the village. Marcus and I eyed each other as we looked down at the street. It was dead silent. We tried and tried again to make contact with Ophelia and the ground team, but all we'd gotten was static. To say I was worried was an understatement. The village was small. Most of its income came from the local fishermen. We hovered over the pier first. The boats below were all empty. As we moved over the streets and the small buildings beyond, we could all feel the hairs on our necks standing up. Now, here we sat, above City Hall. The city was empty, or so it appeared. "Abel, you copy?" I asked. "I'm watching. Last contact we had with Ophelia, she'd set up her base of operations in a hotel 2 blocks to the east," he said. "Let's start there," I replied. Marcus nodded. I looked around at his team. There was a serious demeanor about them. They were missing one of their powerhouse players in David Stone, who I'd thought was dead until we'd fought Lilith in Crawford. He was currently recovering from that battle. Grace was with him as well. I was happy for her. She'd finally gotten to meet her mother. But I was also slightly worried. We needed everyone for this, and Lilith had done a number on us. We found ourselves over the small white-bricked motel. Circe snapped her fingers and teleported Marcus and I to the ground. It was grey outside. There were storm clouds overhead. It wasn't raining yet, but the storm was coming. Marcus and I approached the door to Ophelia's motel room. We approached cautiously. The air smelled of fish and salt. We stopped at the doorway, finding it cracked open. Marcus looked at me from under his helmet. I didn't see his face, but I knew what he was thinking. I nodded at him. He pulled his plasma pistol and pushed the door open gently. It opened with a slight creak. The inside of the room was a disaster. Equipment was strewn everywhere, and there was blood spatter on the walls. My hut scanned it. It was human, but didn't match anyone on my team. I breathed a slight sigh of relief. "Trent," Marcus said softly. I turned to him. He had his pistol aimed at the bathroom door, where I could see a shadow move from underneath the door frame. I aimed my rifle. "Who's in there?" I demanded. The shadow froze. "Come out now," Marcus echoed. "Trent, is that you?" Chad's voice asked. The door opened cautiously. Chad walked out with a pistol. He had blood on his face and in his mohawked hair. "Oh, thank God," he said as he fell forward and regained his balance with Marcus's help. "What happened?" I asked. "We got ambushed last night. Terrell's dead. Rest of the team is MIA. "Who ambushed you?" "There were these creatures. I've never seen anything like them." Marcus clicked a button on his forearm, and a holographic image of a dead creature with whitened skin. It was humanoid and hairless. It had webbed fingers and 4 slanted eyes on its forehead. It had a mouth full of pincer-like teeth. "Is this them?" Chad nodded. "Is that a Strigoi?" I asked. "No, they call them Deep Ones, Dagon's creations. We found a bunch of corpses on the Isle of Dagon a few months ago." "Did they take the team?" I asked. Chad shook his head. "I don't know. We all got separated at the docks. I made it back here." I nodded and looked at Marcus. We needed to get to the docks. We'd flown over the pier earlier, and it was empty. Now, Chad was leading us back in that direction. We had air support overhead. Along the way, Chad explained to us that they'd followed this Captain Hayward to the docks in the dead of night, only for it to be a trap. The docks were quiet as we approached. All we could hear was the sound of the waves crashing. We stopped before crossing from the concrete to the wooden pier. "Wukong, scan for anomalies," Marcus said. "I've got 35 life forms below the waves." "What are they?" Marcus asked. "Scans match the deep ones, and something else." That made my hair stand on edge. I had the spear with me, so if we were to run into Dagon, we could kill him here and now. But my mind weighed heavy on my team. "What's the something else?" asked Marcus. "I'm not." That was when a massive, snake-like oily black tendril erupted from the water. Marcus's ship banked to the side to dodge it. It did so, but barely. My eyes widened at the sheer size of it. The thing had to have been hundreds of feet long. I pulled the spear tip from my hip and readied myself. Then came the screech. I turned as the first, deep one leapt from the water and onto the dock. Chad took a step back. Marcus raised his pistol and went to work. Storming forward behind a volley of plasma balls, each one tearing the creature's flesh to pieces. The Hellhunter's ship rained down energy blasts onto the ocean below. But even more tendrils came forth. The ship pulled backwards, but the tendrils extended. To escape them, the ship let off a hail of energy blasts and flame. But they just didn't do any damage. I didn't have time, however, to stand in awe as the creatures were upon Marcus. I pulled my sword and ignited it. That was when thunder boomed above us. Sheets of rain came pouring down as Marcus and I engaged the creatures on the dock. They were a lot stronger than the Lazarus creatures, a lot faster too, but they still couldn't get through our armor. Our swords still feasted on their flesh, but there were many. Chad had retreated with his pistol. I couldn't blame him, as it did 0 damage. At one point, during the scuffle, I was tackled by one of the creatures. I fell into the water with a splash. I looked around. The water was surprisingly clear. I'd jammed my sword into the throat of the deep one that had attacked me. We'd hit the sandy bottom together. I turned, my suit keeping me from drowning. That was where I saw him for the first time. Hayward was on the water. His back was to me, and he was on his knees, bowing before a creature. This thing had a humanoid body with a head that looked like an inky black octopus. It had a mass of writhing black tendrils erupting from its back, the same black tendrils that were going after the ship. This being was also massive. I was maybe 50 feet below the surface. This thing was at least 20 feet tall. Its tendrils were as thick as tree trunks. I could feel my head begin to ache just by looking at it. I squashed the thought as I gripped the spear tip in one hand and my sword in the other. This was my chance. I started to walk through the water. But the moment I moved, Hayward snapped his head toward me. His face wore a wicked smile. He had small blotches of black tendrils all over him. I didn't care. I'd kill him too. He tilted his head. That was when the worst headache I'd ever received hit me.
"Stay away,"
a guttural voice echoed through my brain. I grunted in pain, but I kept coming forward.
"Stay away. Stay away. I will destroy you."
My head ached and my ears burned. I grunted again. Then, suddenly, I was standing on the top deck. Flames roasted the deep ones around me. A lightning bolt smacked another, vaporizing it. I looked over. That was where I caught Ophelia ripping her sword from another's head. She looked at me, her face wearing a massive cut on her cheek. Megan and Thomas were with her, as was Marcus. I turned when a hand landed on my shoulder, where I found a fully armored Abel standing behind me. "Are you okay?" "I had him," I barked. Abel raised an eyebrow. "He compromised the warding in your suit. I'll explain later," he barked as he snapped his fingers. We were all suddenly standing on the beach of our island base. I was more confused than anything. Why were we running? What had happened? I pulled my helmet off. My suit reeked of fish and salt water. My eyes caught Marcus, who stared at me for a second, almost as if he was bewildered for a slight moment. I could see him mouth the word, Maxis. It made my heart drop a bit. I remembered who I looked like, and I knew the scar given to me by Vlad Tepes hadn't helped. Marcus squashed the thought. I could see him stay by himself. Abel still stood in front of me, his blue eyes boring into me. "We need to fix the warding in your helmet," he said. "Clearly. Now tell me what happened. I could have gotten to him." "Trent, they vanished 5 minutes after you fell in the water. You were standing there staring at nothing during most of the fight. Thank God I was able to find Ophelia and her team before their visions made them kill themselves." "The deep ones were fake?" I asked. "No," Marcus said as he approached. "Dagon's psychic powers are way more powerful than we thought," Abel said. "It doesn't matter. We still have to kill him," Marcus said. "We gotta block his psychic attacks, or you're all gonna die. Tell me, Trent, what did the voice say to you?" "Go away," I said. Abel laughed softly. "What?" He showed Chad images of Rachel. Then it made him hallucinate Vlad assaulting her. Chad shot Terrell. That one made my heart hurt a bit. It explained why Chad was hiding in the bathroom. I looked at Ophelia, who was sitting down on the beach. Her hands were on her stomach. She stared out at the waves. "What'd she see?" I asked. "She didn't say," Marcus said. Abel took a deep breath. He put his hand on my shoulder. "You need to talk to her. I'll take your helmet and put more warding in." I gave Abel my helmet and approached Ophelia. I knelt down beside her. She only stared out at the ocean. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't respond. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she flinched. Her wide eyes shot to me. She teared up as she threw her arms around me. "It's okay," I said. "I was gonna tell you. I swear I was gonna tell you. But I didn't know how you'd react. I didn't want you to take me off mission." "What?" He showed me what he'd do to it. Ophelia sobbed as she buried her head into my shoulder. Hey, it's okay. You made it out. It wasn't real," I said softly. She looked up at me. "Trent, I'm pregnant," she said. My blood ran ice cold. I had no idea what to feel in that moment. My ears were ringing, my arms and legs went limp, and I plopped to the ground next to her. "Oh," I said. She sobbed for a few more seconds. The swirl of emotions happening inside of me was hard to describe. I was going to be a dad. It was exhilarating, but I could tell Ophelia was scared. I was excited, horrified, and uneasy all at once. I couldn't settle on an emotion. Then another realization hit me. I began to laugh. And when I say laugh, I mean I laughed hard. Ophelia stopped sobbing and turned to look at me. "What?" she asked. I was gonna propose at the end of this. She started to laugh too. Her laugh was soft, but it was good to hear. We sat there for a second. How long? I asked. 6 weeks. I remember the night. It was just after the battle in Crawford. It wasn't really romantic. We'd gotten back to base from being cleared by the medics after my concussion. I'd gotten into the shower, and she decided to join me. I'm going to be honest. I'd always been a little scared to be a dad. My dad had vanished when I was a teenager. I didn't have much to go off of for learning how to do the job. But I knew one thing. I'd do better with this one. None of that mattered at the moment. We quietly watched the waves for a second. The sun was high in the sky. Thomas was standing off in the corner and talking on a device. He'd made contact with the Atlanteans. I knew he was going to. We needed backup. Ophelia gently laid her head onto my shoulder. She exhaled. So, you gonna change your mind about proposing? Or? She asked. I laughed softly. Let's make sure the world doesn't end first, I said. I don't know, Trent. If the world's gonna end, maybe you should go ahead. I rolled my eyes as I stood up. I pulled her to her feet. We'll get there, I promise, I said before kissing her. We would walk into the control room where we found Owen sitting next to Miguel, who was watching the computer monitors overhead. We're running the algorithm again, looking for two faces. Samuel Hayward is one, John Armstrong is the other, he said. Are you sure Armstrong isn't dead? I asked. We did find the Lightbringer in the wreckage of Lilith's tomb, Marcus said. Armstrong wasn't part of that mission. He was switched at the last second with a Julius Ashford, said Miguel as he turned and handed me a tablet. On it was an image of Armstrong. He looked like your typical clean-cut astronaut. Why didn't we have that information? Asked Marcus. Because it was encrypted by the US government. Guess who sponsored Project Lightbringer? Oh, for fuck's sake, I said. Yep, we went to their files. Armstrong vanished right when Lilith was killed. Last time he was seen was 4 weeks ago, on a yacht in Mexico. I looked at the image on the tablet. It was of Armstrong. He stood in a suit with his hands in his pockets. The picture had been taken on the yacht as it was leaving a pier. I narrowed my eyes. I looked up at Marcus. You said you fought an alternate version of him? I asked. I did, but that one was possessed by a parasite. This one isn't? Marcus laughed softly. There are no parasites from the outside in this universe. Dagon isn't even from the outside. That doesn't mean he doesn't have influence. When Amonu takes an interest in a soul, it manifests itself across the multiverse. He may not be infected, but he definitely hears the voice, Abel said as he narrowed his eyes. He handed my helmet back to me and took the tablet. Can we find this yacht? He asked. Miguel shrugged. We can try, see if it has a transponder. What are you thinking? I asked. So, Dagon is merely a vessel, like Owen over there. He has his own free will and soul. He was created for Amonu, yes, but he's been shielded from Amonu's influence by that blood spell keeping him on the island. Armstrong may be trying to find him, to convince Dagon to let Amonu take over. You don't think Amonu's already taken over? I asked. No, we're not all dead yet. I looked around the room. Find me that yacht, I commanded. That process took Miguel a few hours. We did find the yacht's transponder. It was in the middle of the Pacific. As far as we knew, Armstrong was just a man, but we didn't want to take any chances. We organized a small strike team. It consisted of myself, Marcus, Wukong, Royce, and Megan. Wukong and Royce would pilot the ship, while Megan, Marcus, and I would board the yacht. We found the yacht in a hurry. It was moving full speed across the blue waves. I eyed Marcus as we traveled. He's going fast. The ship is covered in warding, Wukong's voice said. On the ship's screens, I could see that the boat's wooden deck and fiberglass hull was covered in what looked like runes painted in blood. "What is that?" I asked.
"Looks like a summoning spell,"
Wukong said. "For a Monu?" asked Marcus.
"No, a Monu can't be summoned to Earth Prime,"
Abel's voice said on comms. "Dagon," I said softly. "We need to sink the boat." The ship's weapon system engaged. A blast of energy fired. It reflected off of an invisible shield and hit the water. Steam went up into the air. "Shit," I grumbled. "He's worded more than just a summoning spell," Wukong said. The boat pressed forward. "What do we do?" I asked. Megan stepped next to me. "Marcus, Nemesis, clench up," she said as she snapped her fingers. Marcus, Megan, and I were suddenly on the top deck of the ship. Armstrong standing there with a smirk on his face. He stood there with his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed. "Marcus, I've been waiting to see you again," he said. "You're not the same one I fought in Gaia's tournament." "Ah, you fought but a piece of my soul. My master has allowed me the information needed to access those memories. You want to know what else he's shown me?" Armstrong raised his hands. The wood below us began to vibrate. "Oh no you don't," barked Megan as she raised her hand and sent a torrent of orange flames in his direction. The flames burnt Armstrong's clothes to a crisp. He stepped forward, naked as the day he was born, a wicked smile on his face. Marcus launched something at him. It was a black circular object. He caught it and looked at it for a moment. "Really, Marcus?" he asked. The object exploded with a blue sphere of energy, but when it dissipated, Armstrong was standing there with his arms both glowing blue to his elbows. They had absorbed the plasma bomb's energy. "You think I don't learn?" he said as he fired the energy in beams back at us. Megan stepped forth. The beams deflected on an invisible barrier and cut into the ship. The boat rocked and creaked loudly. Then, the wooden deck of the ship was suddenly flooded. Armstrong looked at the oncoming ocean with surprise. He'd bored gashes into his own boat deep enough to sink it. Armstrong laughed. That was when something blocked out the light of the sun above us.
"Guys, he's here,"
Wukong's voice said on our comlink. We looked up to see the massive Lovecraftian visage of Dagon towering over the ship. Armstrong turned to him with his arms out wide. "Son of a Monu," he bellowed, "come forth and claim your birthright." Dagon looked down on him for a moment. That was when Hayward appeared on the sinking ship ahead of us. I raised the pistol and fired several rounds. None damaged either. "Your master wishes for Dagon to serve?" Hayward asked. "My master wishes for Dagon to claim his destiny." "Dagon doesn't serve. Tell your master that this world doesn't belong to him," Hayward said. Armstrong took a step back in surprise. I could feel the ship sinking below me. "Dagon would serve our enemies? Those who locked them away?" "I told you, Dagon serves no one." A tendril slammed down onto the deck. Armstrong was splattered on contact. We were sent flying into the water. I watched as Dagon and Hayward both vanished. We would get picked up by the ship and taken back to base. Abel looked distressed at the news. The room was tense during the debrief. "Seems Dagon got some daddy issues," I said. "Daddy issues? Amonu isn't his father. Lucifer is," said Marcus. Abel thought for a moment. This did make things somewhat easier, but it also unlocked a whole cascade of other issues. What did Dagon want? Was it conquest? Was it destruction? We would have to find out. We knew it was nothing good. But first, we'd have to find them. Our algorithm kept running, checking every camera connected to the internet, looking for Hayward's face, scouring every corner of the globe. All we could do was wait. A few hours later, I found myself watching Owen and Aisha trading blows with glowing yellow staffs on the training mat. Owen was fast, Aisha was skilled. I'd done some training with Owen the past few weeks. He was excellent in hand-to-hand, but his inexperience with weapons showed. Aisha was by and large one of the best melee instructors we had. Owen's blows were fierce. Aisha evaded and whacked him with her staff. "Control, control is everything," she said. Owen tried again. This time, his staff glanced off of hers. He spun and managed to pop her in the leg. She took a step back and smiled. "Very good." I turned and saw Chat sitting and watching Miguel build his Devastator armor. I could tell that thoughts weighed heavily. Chat had shot Terrell dead. It wasn't his fault, and he knew it, but it was still hard. Chat and Terrell had become good friends after Chat's wife had died. I cautiously approached him. "You gonna be okay?" I asked. He took a sip from a beer can, then smacked his lips. "I'm just tired of losing people." "Yeah, so am I." He eyed me for a moment, then went back to watching Miguel. "I should have known. We knew Dagon had psychic powers. It isn't your fault." "Why do you have to use Rachel?" Chat asked. I honestly didn't know. I wish I did. Maybe Dagon was a sadist. Maybe he was cruel. It didn't matter. I wasn't sure what to say in that moment. We sat there in silence for a minute. "Can I ask you something?" he asked. "Sure." "Did you ever tell Ophelia about Isabel?" I laughed softly. Isabel was a rogue agent I knew once. She was before Ophelia. We'd had a short, fiery relationship before she'd been shot in the stomach. I'm not sure if she had died or if she just went home. I've mentioned her once or twice. We don't really talk about exes. Why? "Did you ever look her up after? You know." "I did once. Never could find her. I figured she'd been KIA. "How did you deal with the loss?" I shrugged. "Chat, we both know I'm not exactly a role model for dealing with emotions. I mean, my dad died, and I pushed everyone so hard, we ended up doing more harm than good. People died because of it. That's why I took that time off. But now you're back. You got through it." "You will too," I said. We could hear Owen and Aisha's staffs colliding behind us, the sound of Miguel's air gun screwing in bolts ahead of us. Chat took another sip. "You still planning the proposal?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "I don't know, man. With everything going on, I'm not sure I'll get the chance." "Well, if you don't propose, she's probably going to. We're gonna have to figure it out, especially with the baby on the way," I said. Chat's eyes widened as he turned to me. He took another drink from his beer without breaking eye contact. I sighed. "What? Dude. What? What, you'd forget to pull out?" he asked with a shit-eating grin that made me want to slap him. I narrowed my eyes at him. "I don't kiss and tell," I said before standing up. I turned back toward the mat. Aisha had somehow knocked Owen on his ass and stood over him. I could see Ophelia standing there watching. I started to walk to their direction, but was cut off by a voice. "Trent?" Megan said. I turned toward the witch as she approached me. "Yes?" "There's an Atlantean envoy here to see you." Ophelia, Megan, and I exited the base. I've stated before that our island base is mostly underground, with a small neighborhood sitting above it on the surface level. Well, just outside of the neighborhood rests a ring of vegetation. Then there's the airstrip, which also has an entrance to our base. Past the airstrip is the beach, where we found Thomas waiting for us with several Atlantean soldiers, two of which I recognized as actual gods. There was Poseidon, who stood with his trident. Then there was Thor, who smiled at us as we approached. "Poseidon, Thor, welcome to the island," I said. Poseidon looked me up and down. He looked irritated. He handed his trident to the soldier behind him. "Mr. Grayson," he greeted. How can we help you? Actually, this is more how we can help you, he said as he placed the tablet in my hands. I looked down at the video. The camera was underwater. On it was what looked like a chaotic stone structure, like an ant mound made from stone. It was moving slowly through the water. The craft got closer and closer. I could see something moving just outside of the structure. They looked humanoid. They swam through the water like dolphins. I realized what they were really quick. Deep ones. This was taken by one of our patrol ships 3 days ago. What is it? Far as I can tell, some kind of nest. It's heading towards Atlantis. I narrowed my eyes at him. Have you tried to destroy it? I asked. We did, he said as he gestured to the video. The craft recording fired 2 torpedoes at the structure. Both torpedoes simply missed, arcing straight down and exploding onto the seafloor. The craft fired an energy beam next. This did the same. A barrier? Blood magic? I asked. I've never seen anything like it. We were hoping you could help. We're expecting an attack of some sort. Thor added. I nodded. Let me gather my team. Normally, if one were trying to attack Atlantis, they'd have to get really clever. The city was floating a mile in the sky above one of the most dangerous oceans in the world. The sea right below it was patrolled by a mixture of genetically modified creatures from different mythologies and their own sub-fleet. It was almost impossible to invade from the sea. It was even harder from the air. But this was Dagon we were talking about, the most powerful being in the multiverse, save for Amonu himself. I could see the apprehension in Poseidon's face. They knew we had the spear. They knew if anyone had a shot to beat Dagon, it was us. But that still left another question. Why was Dagon moving against Atlantis? I asked Poseidon this question. He exhaled. We caught Loki last week. Why didn't you tell us? We were going to, Thor said. But? Thor and Poseidon looked at each other. This situation arose. We think Dagon is after Loki. It made sense. Loki was Lilith's spawn, a half-brother to the monster himself. How did you capture him? We've been trying to find him for a year. He turned himself in, half-mad and spewing nonsense about the Black Messiah's new collective. My eyes caught Abel as he appeared next to us. What the hell does that mean? I asked. Poseidon shrugged. Abel rubbed his chin, then turned to me. If he's after Loki, we can use him as bait. Lure him in, Abel suggested. Stab him with the pointy end? Said Thor. Poseidon thought for a moment. I would rather not risk more lives than we have to. You may not have a choice if Dagon is coming with an army, I said. Poseidon considered this for a moment, then looked at Thor. Thor shrugged. We could evacuate the city to the mothership, have our battle, kill the beast, then put Loki on trial, Thor said. Poseidon and Thor would depart while we prepped. The calculation was that Dagon's structure would be underneath Atlantis in less than 24 hours. Our plan was to be there before. While we prepped, we had a few more arrivals on base. Namely, Abel's horseman brother, Quintus, and Ken Sullivan. Ken Sullivan had a sad, tired look to him. He had been the reason Dagon had escaped. He had blown Lilith's original body's head clean off. He'd claimed the horseman's power to do so. There was a lot of debate amongst some of what to do with him. I can remember sitting in on the meeting. Gabriel the Archangel and Heaven's Spymaster wanted there to be some form of punishment. Nothing major, more of a reprimand. Raziel, who had been injured during the battle against Lilith's pet dragon Tiamat, wanted Ken stripped of his powers. Michael understood Ken's decision and also suggested a reprimand. But the ultimate decision was left to Abel and Quintus, who both agreed that Ken was chosen for a reason. They decided to train him to use his powers. We questioned Ken, asking him why he disobeyed a direct order to take Lilith alive, knowing what would happen if he didn't. I saw her tendrils around Megan's throat. All I could think about was the way she'd killed William. I couldn't. I couldn't lose anyone else, he said. I understood. I really did. He loved Megan. She loved him. I couldn't imagine that I'd have done anything different had Ophelia been in that same situation, especially now. There was a debate during the Dagon situation. As we prepped for battle, we had 4 armies getting ready. The Atlantean military, the 9th Roman Legion, a company of exterminators with some keeper ships. Then us. Don't get me wrong, we weren't exactly an army, more like a dollar store version of the Justice League. We also had 2 archangels on standby in case we started getting overwhelmed. That made me feel a lot better. I stood with Ophelia in the Wasp as we landed on a helipad-like structure on the Atlantean island. I could hear my team shuffling around behind me. Part of me wished David would finish recovering so we could get Grace back. I knew Marcus had arrived around an hour before I had. He'd been on the ground helping direct the 9th Roman Legion with Quintus. My team was to wait in the Colosseum with Loki. Well, my team minus Ophelia and Owen. I didn't want Owen to leave the base, not with his new half-brother roaming around. He had Duke to keep him company. I also didn't want Ophelia risking our child's life. I'd explained this to her in the back of the Wasp. I get it, Trent, but if Dagon wins, we're all gonna die anyway, she said. I know, and you'll be able to help, I said. How so? The door opened, revealing Thor standing there. Thomas marched up to him and hugged him. Takeshi and Aisha passed me as I turned to Ophelia. I want you in the Wasp, doing Overwatch. She glared at me for a moment. Again, she didn't like it, but I knew she understood. Chad walked past me as well. Fine, but if you start getting your ass kicked, I'm coming down. My eyes caught Abel waiting for us in full armor. He had a scythe in one hand. I wouldn't expect anything less, I said to her. Ophelia kissed me, then got into the ship's co-pilot seat. Miguel looked back at me. That everyone? Megan had teleported with Ken. I stepped off the aircraft and nodded. Miguel smiled and shot me a thumbs up. Then, the ship began to climb skyward. I turned to Abel and Chad. Chad smiled. She did not look happy. That's because she wants to fight. Now, let's get to the Colosseum. The outside of the Colosseum was a wide open plaza with statues of the 4 original council members, each over 100 feet tall and clad in bronze. There were the statues of Zeus, Odin, Ra, and Kali. One of those council members had been murdered by their own wife a few months prior. The 9th Roman Legion had set up a defensive position in the plaza, guarding the front entrance to the arena. I found Marcus and Quintus directing their defensive lines. I'd seen the 9th in action a few times by this point. I will admit, it was strange being around so many Omega soldiers. Most were silent. Most didn't talk much. I understood why. They'd all died and been tortured in hell for over 1,000 years. Now they were back. I walked up to Marcus and his horsemen. Quintus and I shook hands. Are your guys ready for a fight? I asked. Quintus looked at the man behind him. For the 9th, he shouted. For the 9th. All his men said in unison. Oh God, that made me hard. Chad said from behind me. I smiled and then looked over at Abel. Ra and Odin had appeared and were conversing with him. We made our defensive lines thin in the center. If all goes right, they should come down the street and straight to you. Yes, if all goes to plan. They talked over said plan as we made our way into the Colosseum. Inside, we found a small glass cell where Loki rocked back and forth in a fetal position. Loxley stood next to it, his eyes glaring down at the rogue god. He eyed Kane, who was looking at us. It seems his mind has been bewitched. Badly, said Kane. The sands of the Colosseum were crawling with exterminators. All of these had machine gun nests set up at various entrances. We also had riflemen in the bleachers. I watched the battlefield through my hut. We had 3 to 4 dozen drones circling the city, and all of them had camera feeds. It wasn't until nightfall that we got our first sign of Dagon's forces. The call came over the radio.
Talon 1 is here. The structure is 200 yards out.
I could see the dark object beneath the waves via my drone feed. It had to be several miles long. It came closer and closer. I could see another black mass swimming toward it. It was a massive, snake-like creature. I never got the creature's name. I never cared to. I know that one of the underwater feet caught it as it barreled toward the structure. The deep ones came forth from every nook and cranny. It was a perpetual swarm. They swarmed the serpent, devouring its flesh like a bunch of piranhas. The creature was stripped to the bone in moments. The submersibles all opened fire. But the swarm was great. It was massive. One by one, the underwater feet went out. I was standing next to Loki's cell, watching the feet through my helmet. "He's here," Loki whimpered from next to me. I ignored him. That was when one of the feet showed the water directly below the city. We still weren't sure how Dagon was planning to reach the island in the sky. The fighting on the water had stopped. All was quiet. I could hear Odin's voice over the radio.
Does anyone copy? Is anyone alive down there?
There was suddenly a loud screech. My hands shot to my ears. That was when the structure surfaced. My eyes widened in my helmet as several massive black tendrils, each covered with a swarm of deep ones, came forth from the ocean. These things were as big as skyscrapers. Our ships opened fire, but the ordnance didn't have any effect. They hit the edges of the city, smashing through the bronze-colored walls. The swarms began their assault. But the tendrils didn't stop there. The whole island lurched down. Everyone around me lost their balance for a moment. I could hear Loki giggle next to me. That was when I realized what Dagon was doing. He was trying to pull the island back to the sea. The island lurched again. In my drone feed, I could see the Atlantean forces engaging the deep ones along the walls and at the edges of the city. I could see right outside the Colosseum as Quintus continued to direct the 9th. "Atlantis is going down. Back to the ocean where it belongs," Loki grumbled. "Will you shut the hell up?" asked Chad. Loki looked at him and smiled. I continued to watch the battle unfold. The Atlanteans did better against the deep ones. Their blasters did good work, as did their blades. I saw some gods I remembered in the melee: Ares, Heimdall, Kali amongst others. But the city lurched again. "We have to take out those tentacles before they pull the city down," said Abel. "How? Our guns aren't doing any damage." That was when another tendril landed on the other side of the city. The island lurched down again, then began to ascend. It fought. The island's anti-gravity system half the way down before they finally gave out. We found ourselves in free fall. My stomach went into my throat. I was trying to brace myself while Loki laughed hysterically from his cage. We hit the ocean hard, landing right on top of the structure. Inside the Colosseum had become chaotic as everyone tried to recover. I could see the water flow through the holes in the walls and onto the bronze-colored streets. Soldiers were washed away. I'm not sure how, but the island didn't completely sink, and most of the buildings were still standing. The water was only maybe a foot deep across most of the city, aside from the walls, where it was flooding in fast. I could hear the combat raging outside the stadium. A drone feed played in my helmet as it hovered over the Colosseum. I could see the 9th engaged outside. The attack came from multiple sides, and not just right down the main road. I guess when the island was yanked down, it threw our whole plan to shit. That didn't matter to the 9th. They fought like hell. Their weapons cut through the deep ones like papier-mâché. That had given us time to reorganize ourselves. I watched intently as the exterminators inside the Colosseum readied themselves. It was dead silent, other than their commanders giving orders.
Alright, has anyone spotted Dagon?
Asked Abel over comms.
Are you telling me those massive tentacles aren't his?
asked Chad. They had watched the same drone feats I had, but on a holographic projection courtesy of one of the exterminator commanders. They are Dagons. They are an extension of Dagon, Loki's voice said softly. They are part of the collective. The collective? I asked as I turned to Loki. Loki was standing there, staring at me. He had a large smile on his face. Had Dagon joined Amonu's collective? I looked at him closely, my HUD scanning him, my eyes narrowed. Dagon didn't join Amonu, I said quizzically. No, he didn't. He created his own collective. My HUD began to glitch. The pictures from the drone feed lost some of their pixelation. That was when I realized something about Loki. His own collective? What does Dagon want? I asked. Loki realized I'd figured him out. He went from a mad, smiling demeanor to calm, deathly calm. Do you know madness, Trent? Do you know what drives one mad? He asked. All eyes were on Loki now. Abandonment. Being stuck alone for eons with not just the thoughts in your head, but also the thoughts of everyone else. Everyone's pain, everyone's suffering, everyone's intention and dreams. Do you know how little hope there is in this world? My ears started to ring. They rang loudly. It was uncomfortable at first, but quickly started to become unbearable. Dagon isn't Amonu. Dagon doesn't want to unite everyone by making them part of his collective. Dagon doesn't want a throne. Dagon doesn't want revenge. Dagon wants, but for one thing. Silence. And he will kill everything to get it. Small black blotches of tendrils began growing on Loki's face as he spoke. They writhed and wriggled like worms in the dirt. I turned to Abel, who had his scythe ready. What did that have to do with you? I asked. Larger tendrils started emerging from Loki's back. Nothing. Dagon just needed you here, he said as his tendrils smashed through the cell. His tendrils lurched at me. I pulled my sword and lopped them off. Abel made his move, moving in a blur and gashing the Dagon-infected Loki with his scythe. Then, a torrent of black flames hit Loki from the side. The former rogue god was incinerated. I looked over at Cain. What just happened? I asked. Dagon infected Loki with himself. If Dagon wasn't after Loki, what was he after? I asked. It was then that gunfire erupted from inside the Colosseum. I turned to one of the main doors, where I saw several deep ones swarming down the hallway.
Trent, we just got a call from Ray at base. They're under attack.
Ophelia's voice said shakily. Abel and I looked at each other. Owen, I barked. We need to get back, said Chad. I looked around. I couldn't in good mind abandon our Atlantean allies. We'll go. You guys hold the city. Don't let these things take it, Abel said to Chad before looking at me. You ready? I nodded. Abel snapped his fingers. We were suddenly inside the base with both Quintus and Marcus. The first thing I noticed was the collection of smells. There was cooked fish and rot and sulfur. I gritted my teeth. We'd ended up in the hangar bay. The whole place was a mess. There were several puddles of blood. I ran through the base looking for him, my mind racing. Abel, Marcus, and Quintus following close behind, finding myself in a hallway where there were even more blood and red lights flickering above us. Owen? I called out. My HUD located something moving ahead of me. I pulled my sword. It was humanoid. At first, I thought it was Hayward. But as it stepped forward, I realized it wasn't. It was much, much worse. The inky black eyes on the cephalopod head stared at me. It stepped forward, tendrils emerging from its back. This thing seemed to grow as it approached. It had to have been 10 feet tall. You, I said as I started to pull the spear tip. Wait, Abel said as he stepped in front of me. The lights flickered again. Suddenly, the creature ahead of us started to split. It was like a grotesque, wet and sticky mitosis. We were suddenly staring at the two of them. I narrowed my eyes. "Which one do I stab?" I asked. "Neither of these beings have souls. You go and find Owen," said Quintus. Abel and Quintus engaged the two creatures. The fight was brutal. The creatures were powerful for drones, but Marcus and I didn't have the time to watch. "Let's go, Maxis." Marcus barked at me. He'd done it again. I didn't have time to correct him this time. We ran toward the panic room, which was on the bottom level, and warded it to hell. We got there in a hurry. We found the bunker door smashed in, and the room a disaster. It was dark on the other side. We approached cautiously. My HUD was scanning the security feeds as it tried to locate anyone else in the base. We inched closer and closer to the darkness. There was suddenly movement. Marcus and I brought our rifles up. Then we heard the dog whimper. Duke limped out. There had only been maybe 20 people on base when we left. There were at least 15 bodies in the bunker, most soldiers and some scientists. I found our psychologist's corpse missing both her legs in one corner. My HUD finally got a hit on the base's security camera, or Mikhail's algorithm had. Hayward was up top. He was dragging an unconscious Owen past the airfield. Marcus and I both took off. We caught up to them at the beach. Hayward was almost in the water. "Stop!" I shouted. Hayward looked at me and raised a brow. His eyes shot to the spear point in my hand. "Let him go," Marcus commanded. "Dagon wishes to meet his father. You'll know where." He sneered. Hayward stood up straight and smiled. Then he snapped his fingers, and they both vanished. We stood there for a moment. "Trent? Marcus?" Abel's voice called out. We turned quickly. Abel was trying his best to hold the very wounded Quintus up. The horseman was gashed. He had deep cuts on his arms, and his armor had been eviscerated. Blood poured from every wound. "What happened?" Marcus said sharply. Abel laid Quintus down on the beach. Marcus took his helmet off as he fell to his knees beside his former general, Quintus looking up at Marcus. His face was pale. "Got me good," Quintus said before coughing up blood. "It's fine, we can fix you. Cain has the Philosopher's Stone." Quintus gave Marcus a bloody smile. "No, but Marcus," he said weakly, "I should have stayed dead. You helped me get an extra 1,000 years of borrowed time. I'm grateful." Quintus shoved his club into Marcus's chest. Marcus took it. The moment he did, the club flashed. It had suddenly morphed into a sword, one that looked really similar to the one Marcus used on a regular basis. "No, I can't. I still need. Just stop," Quintus gasped. "If there's one being in this world that deserves this kind of power, it's you. Take it. Become what you were always destined to be. Now let me fucking die." Quintus took Abel and Marcus's hands. His eyes landed on me. He smiled as the life faded from his eyes. Abel sighed solemnly as he looked down at the sand. "How?" I asked. Abel shook his head. He looked at his bloody hands. He had tears in his eyes. "They're psychic powers. They tricked us." I pulled off my helmet and looked at Marcus. Marcus was staring at the sword, his mind no doubt grieving and pondering his newfound responsibilities. That was when another call came through.
Dagon's forces are retreating.
Ophelia's voice called. "We have another problem," I said. The next few hours went by slowly. Atlantis saw unheard of amounts of damage. The tendrils had come from the structure. When Atlantean scans of it came back, we found that it was an entire living organism inside of a stony shell. That very thought was horrifying. Everyone suffered casualties. The Atlantean army lost over 1,000. 700 exterminators were killed. Then, 47 soldiers of the 9th. Marcus had each of their names memorized. I would go back into our security system and watch the footage of Owen being taken. Owen was standing in the control room. Ray stood alongside him. They were watching the same drone footage that we had been at the beginning of the battle. Duke sat on his haunches in the corner. Owen's mother was with his sister in the States. That was why she wasn't on site during the attack. I dreaded having to explain this to her. He looked over at Ray as the battle commenced.
Did you hear that?
He asked.
Hear what?
Owen turned and walked towards the entrance to the room. On another feat, Hayward had killed the guards at the front door, snapping both of their necks. The soulless, Lovecraftian drones behind him. They pried the sliding steel bunker door open, and he walked through. Owen turned to Ray.
I think we're being attacked.
I could see another feat. The drones were about to enter a cafeteria. One of the soldiers inside suddenly shot to his feet, pulled his sidearm, and blew his own brains out. His two companions screamed. They shot to their feet and started to run. They didn't go far. One was caught by a tendril from the drone, and the other became comatose as he just stopped. This other guard shot himself as well. His body crumpled to the floor while the drone strangled the life from the last one. The drones continued. By this time, Ray was taking Owen and several other people, including Duke, down to the panic room. They made it inside and got the door closed. That was when Ray was called for help. I watched as Owen stood at the door. He didn't have his sword on him.
I'm not letting you take control,
he said out loud, no doubt to his father. There was a loud bang. Duke growled. The hair on his back stood up. Ray aimed the rifle. There was another bang. Then another. Then the door was dented. Then it came open. Owen didn't hesitate, raising a hand and sending a swath of black flames at one of the drones. The drone charged through it, its flesh boiling and sizzling. That explained the smell of sulfur and cooked fish. Owen attacked it, leaping forward and pummeling it with his fists. Ray opened fire with his rifle on the second drone. Duke attacked it as well, jumping at it. It smacked Duke into a wall with a tendril. Duke yelped. Owen went to attack the second creature, but he stopped mid-air. Hayward had entered the room, and he had his hands raised. Owen eyed him and raised a hand. Black flame came forth, but it didn't even burn Hayward's clothing. This made me raise a brow. Owen was suddenly yanked through the air until he was face to face with Hayward.
So you're the chosen heir. I expected more. I'll kill you,
Owen roared.
Ah, your creator's purpose for you. I had one of those once. I changed mine. I'm going to change yours as well,
Hayward said. That statement made my blood run cold. I had a realization. The massive creature I'd seen in Spain, the drones, Loki, the deep ones, all of these were only extensions of Dagon. Soulless drones, if you will. The whole time, we'd thought that Hayward was just an infected human. But no, Hayward was Dagon. Dagon put his finger on Owen's forehead, and he collapsed. He turned and began walking out. While this was going on, his remaining drones started massacring everyone in the room. Most killed themselves. Ray put his pistol in his mouth and fired. The CIA's youngest ever to graduate the farm had painted the ceiling with his brains. Dagon's drone ripped others apart with his tendrils. It was a bloodbath. We weren't sure what Dagon wanted Owen for, other than maybe revenge on Lucifer. Maybe some leverage on us. All we really knew was that he was winning. I stood behind Marcus as he spoke with the Hellhunters. It had been less than 12 hours since Dagon had violated the island and taken Owen hostage. Everyone was tense. Marcus had explained to them what the plan was. We were going to pick up Lucifer from Sunshine. Then, the Hellhunters would be in charge of escorting him to wherever Dagon wanted to have our next confrontation. All of us were in agreement that there was a good chance Dagon was going to try and destroy both Owen and Lucifer. I personally didn't care for Lucifer, but I wasn't about to let Owen die. As we headed to the Sunshine facility, I watched footage of the night the SNOD captured Lucifer. It was via helmet camera footage of someone I'd known a long time ago, someone who Jamie had killed. He was Agent Cameron Shaw back then, not quite the aging director he was when he had been killed. He and a heavily armed squad of men had surrounded the one-armed Prince of Darkness, their rifles aimed. Lucifer stood at the front door of a house, his one hand up. He smiled.
I'm not going to fight you, ants.
He didn't. He went easily, cooperatively. Then I watched video footage of the Sunshine breakout. The night Jamie and Raiden had escaped. Lucifer's cell had come open. He only sat in it and sighed. The breakout itself lasted maybe 6 hours. Lucifer only left the cell once. That was when a vampire attacked one of the guards who was taking shelter on the lower level. Lucifer calmly walked over and bashed his head into mush against the wall, then promptly returned and sat down. It seemed to me that he wanted to be locked up. Then I'd remembered something he said. His other son had come to visit him. I tried to pull that footage, but the footage had been deleted. Or maybe it was never there. Maybe Lucifer had lied. Or maybe the conversation happened in his head. Maybe the former devil was mad. Marcus and I arrived at Sunshine. We found ourselves sitting in the elevator, watching as the numbers on the holographic display passed one at a time. It was quiet between us. We both knew why. Marcus was still in his armor. Not that he needed it. He'd taken his helmet off as he stared down at the sword in his hand. Its blade was silver and had a glint to it. "It's nice," I said. "Yeah, I don't deserve this. I didn't want this," he said. "Marcus, if there's anyone more deserving, I'd like to meet them." "If anyone deserves it, it's Maxis," Marcus said. "Your son? Isn't he dead?" "No, Maxis. He was my primus pilus." "Your primus vadis?" "Primus pilus. It's like my commanding officer. He was the one in hell fighting for their freedom." I shrugged. "Quintus was the general, right?" I asked. "Yeah." I could tell that Marcus was having trouble wrapping his head around why he was chosen over his sworn brother. "I don't think he chose you over Maxis as a slight at Maxis. I think maybe Maxis needs to be where he is." "Maybe," Marcus said as he drew in a long sigh. "Speaking of Maxis," he continued, "I'm sorry I keep misnaming you. I'm not crazy. I know, a loss is hard. I couldn't imagine losing a child. Luckily for you, you don't have any." I laughed. "What?" Marcus asked. "That's gonna change soon." Marcus's eyes got big. "You're expecting?" "Yeah." "With Ophelia?" "Who else would I have gotten pregnant?" "Damn, I'm gonna have another grade in my title." I laughed. Then the elevator door dinged. We were greeted by Captain Gray. Twice in 1 week, and here I thought old boy couldn't make friends. He led us down the concrete hallway, then into the room with Lucifer's cell. Lucifer sat there staring at us. He didn't look very happy. "You let him take my son," he said. "So you know," I replied. "Yes, I do. I've been speaking with it through Owen's mind." "It? You mean Dagon, your oldest son?" "He's clearly no son of mine. That thing's mind is chaotic. I thought Amonu was insane, but at least he wanted everything to live, if you can call it that." "Why does Dagon want you?" I asked. Lucifer shrugged. "Everyone wants something from me, just like you do now." "Yeah, we want to trade you for your son." "That would be foolish. Good lord, do you ants ever use your brains?" "Dagon wants to absorb me. He wants to absorb Owen, but can't do so without me." "Why?" "Dagon was crafted when Amonu's essence possessed me and forced me to shove my special tentacle inside of Lilith. Ugh, the thought grosses me out. Dagon may be my oldest son on a technicality, but he doesn't contain any angelic energy. I did not bestow that part of my seat in Lilith that night. That was the same night we realized what Amonu's true intents were. Okay, first off, ew, I said. You think that's gross? You should hear about the time Lilith shoved a tendril in my butt. Lucifer, Marcus barked. Lucifer's black eyes snapped onto him. Dagon wants to absorb angelic energy? Why? To get into heaven and hell. He's powerful enough to teleport. But he's been warded. He cannot enter the Silver City or Gehenna. That warding would take the soul of more than one archangel to break. Hence why he wants both Owen and mine. You said he needs you to absorb Owen? Yeah, I set up the spells in Owen's DNA that prevent things like that from happening. I knew Lilith would come for him eventually. I figured Owen and I would kill her together. Then we'd have to deal with Dagon. You can't call me a bad father. You wanted to possess your son and use him. I wouldn't call you a good one. But your other sons want to destroy the planet. Marcus said. What can I say? I'm not perfect. Well, Dagon's not going to reveal his location unless you come with us. So get up, I said. Lucifer looked at me and cocked his head to the side. Look at the ant giving me orders. I could squash you like a bug. Then Abel would turn you into paste, I said. This made Lucifer laugh. I already did you one favor. You still owe me for that one. I looked at Marcus, then reached into a pouch on my armor and pulled a cosmic brownie out and held it up. I'm a man of my word. Lucifer eyed me. Then I thanked the brownie. Then... That's a good one, Trent. He laughed. Marcus looked at me with a concerned expression. Fine, I'll come along. I guess dying horribly beats staying here. With that, we left. We took Lucifer up the elevator to the top level and walked him straight towards Marcus's ship, where the ramp was down and a man waited for us. A man with similar facial features to Lucifer, but with slightly darker hair, blue eyes, and a thick beard. Lucifer stood up straight and smiled when the two met. Michael, he said, they didn't tell me you'd be tagging along. Michael looked at him, then at Marcus and I. Did you think heaven would let you go anywhere unsupervised? I'm here to remind you about the consequences of betraying us. Lucifer chuckled. Brother, I ran hell once. I specialize in consequences. Tell me though, how were my sloppy seconds? Michael looked Lucifer up and down, then turned and walked into the ship. Marcus and I stood there awkwardly. Lucifer followed his brother up into the ship. We followed behind them, reaching the inside, where Wukong gave Lucifer a wary side eye. Lucifer winked at him. Marcus placed a hand on Royce's shoulder. Take us back to base. Then what? Asked Circe from her station. We wait for Dagon. Michael said sternly as he eyed his brother. I could see Lucifer's face get serious, if only for a fraction of a second. We landed at base a short while later. Upon exiting the ship, we were met by the sight of Ken petting Duke behind an ear. Lucifer smiled as we walked past. You have a hellhound? He asked. He doesn't belong to any of us. We don't actually know what happened to his owner, Marcus said. Lucifer stared at the wolf for a moment. The wolf stared back, tilting its head quizzically. It seems the walker line has ended, Lucifer said. Ken raised an eyebrow. He communicates telepathically. It only works for certain individuals. I helped create a species, so I'm one of them, Lucifer said. So Walker is dead? I asked. Shot in the head for sending you the report. Shame too. Seems like he had potential. We continued on, passing Miguel, who had finally finished the Devastator armor and was busy testing it. The bulky black and green armor made the ground rumble with each step. It was armed with two Gao-8s that were attached to its enormous forearms. For those of you wondering what a Gao-8 is, look up the A10 Warthog. This thing had a shoulder-mounted 120mm semi-automatic cannon that was outfitted with Atlantean shells. Hell, all the armor and weapons had some slight Atlantean upgrades. As I'd previously stated, all we had to do from this point was wait for Dagon. That wait turned out to be relatively short. Lucifer would have a vision through a psychic link with Owen, one he would draw up for us. It was just a simple image of an underground tunnel. It looked like an old subway. On the walls, there were rows of old, tattered, and torn posters. It was there that we got our first hint. In the posters, or in the writing on the posters. It was in a language I wasn't versed in. But luckily, Aisha and Takeshi both spoke it. The next step was figuring out which city he was under. That tip-off came when the algorithm got a hit in front of Gideon Tower. Dagon was in Tokyo. He had been caught on camera by a local store that happened to be across from the tower. We knew we had to mobilize. We did that part quick. The Keeper fleet stayed cloaked as they made their way over Tokyo Bay. I sat in the Wasp with my team, my suit's hut feeding me information from the Keeper scans. It didn't take us long to find the nest. Tokyo had an assortment of abandoned underground subway stations. We found one in particular that was close to the bay. One with thousands of Deep One signatures.
You think Owen's in there?
Marcus's voice asked over the comlink. Only one way to find out, I replied. I didn't like the idea of being trapped on the ground with those things, especially underneath a highly populated city. We tried to make contact with the Japanese government to warn them about the coming onslaught, but did assure us that GSF would handle it, which was something else that I had to consider. Why was Dagon outside of Gideon Tower on the camera feed? Had he let himself be seen there? Then it hit me. Marcus, scan the Gideon Tower. The footage went through to me. I could hear the air catch in Marcus's throat. The building was void of all life forms aside from two. Two that we knew. But then came the other problem. There were life forms underground surrounding the building. Hordes of Deep Ones and quite a few drones. Scans show Dagon and Owen in the penthouse. The rest of the creatures are staying at ground level. Abel's voice said. I looked over at Ophelia in the pilot seat. She nodded.
He's waiting for us,
Lucifer said on comms.
Alright, I want a perimeter around the base of the tower. Clear out all civilians if you can. Aye.
Abel was interrupted by an extremely loud explosion to our right. Orange fireballs lit up the night from the city below. I turned and looked out one of the Wasp's side windows, where a massive writhing tendril emerged from the ground. It towered over the buildings, missing one of the Keeper ships by a few feet. Keepers, what am I looking at? That was when the screech echoed out.
Scans show a large... Oh god.
I could hear Roy say on comms. The thing that emerged from underneath the buildings was the size of a kaiju. It was like a writhing mass of black tentacles surrounding a mouth full of jagged razor-sharp teeth. It tore a path of destruction through the streets. People were flattened, cars were torn apart, and buildings collapsed. What the hell is that thing? I asked.
It's headed toward the tower,
Marcus said. I could see the exterminators that had landed at the base of the tower. Miguel was dropped off by a Keeper ship in his Devastator armor. The perimeter around the building was tight. The rest of my team, aside from Ophelia, who was piloting the Wasp, landed on the tower roof. It was myself, Aisha, Megan, Ken, Thomas, and Chad. Our job was to get inside. Marcus and his team would land close by. His team consisted of Wukong, Circe, Royce, and Lucifer, who was still a prisoner. Michael and Abel were with us as well. Abel was with us and Michael keeping a close eye on Lucifer. The two teams formed a column as we approached the stairway. I was in the front, behind my rifle. Tom was directly behind me in full bronze-colored Atlantean armor. He had one of their plasma rifles ready to roll. We could hear the gunfire erupt from the street below us. The Deep Ones had begun their assault. They were a way to keep our forces busy, no doubt. The inside of the building was a disaster. We'd found ourselves in the stairwell. There was wording written in blood all over the walls. It stank like death and shit. My hut scanned the warning. Abel took one look at it and muttered something to himself. What? I could hear Ken ask. I've never seen this particular spell before. Neither have I, Megan said. Kane? Abel asked, overcomes. Kane had been on the ground with Loxley and Miguel.
It's hard to describe. I haven't seen anything like this since that apartment building in 09. I think it could be the Ryla incantation.
I could see Megan's eyes widen. Fuck, she said. What? I asked. Don't touch anything. Do your best to stick together, Abel replied as we continued down the stairs. What is it? Asked Thomas. It's called the Ryla incantation. It's a reality distortion spell. If used properly, it could turn a building into an LSD trip. Ryla, like from Call of Cthulhu? I asked. That's where the inspiration for the name came from. I've never seen it in person, said Abel. Trent, I didn't know you could read, Chad said from the back. Abel took another breath. Like I said, don't touch anything. Stay close. I'd rather us not. I suddenly found myself in a long hallway, the lights above me flickering on and off. There was an alarm sounding somewhere in the building. The walls on either side were glass and stamped with the Gideon logo. There were dead bodies and blood all over the floor. Oh shit, I grumbled.
Trent, where are you?
Marcus's voice came under the comlink.
I'm not sure. Everyone got separated.
Chad's voice replied. It was then that it dawned on me. Dagon probably brought Lucifer to himself and separated the rest of us. We had to get up there. The only issue was, I wasn't sure where exactly I'd ended up. Also, the mutated deep one that had appeared on the other end of the hallway. When I say mutated, I mean this thing was twice the size of a normal deep one, and its back was covered in tendrils. Its 4 eye slits locked onto me. It hissed. I pulled my sword. The beast rocketed forward. I charged in as well. The creature was fast. Its tendrils shot out at me like sharpened spikes. I slashed and gashed. Several of the tendrils were cut off. It tried to claw me. Its claw caught in my shoulder, and I flew through one of the glass walls, shattering it as I landed inside on an office desk. The creature flew in after me. I rolled off the table at the last second. The creature's head snapped in my direction. I got to my feet right as a bolt of lightning hit the creature in the back. The creature hissed in agony. I took my opportunity, leaping forward and driving my burning blue blade into the creature's back over and over again until it ceased to move. I turned to Thomas, who stood at the broken glass. What took you so long? I asked. What's wrong with this fucking building? I ended up in a bathroom. Where's Lucifer? I asked on the comlink.
He's with me. I've got us tethered together via a chain spell. He isn't teleporting anywhere without me,
Michael said. Where are you?
Scans show they're on the top floor.
Ophelia's voice said. What about the rest of us?
Trent, you and Thomas are 2 floors down. Abel is on the 3rd floor. Megan and Ken are on the 27th.
What about the Hellhunters?
We're still in the stairway, just at the bottom,
Marcus said. I turned to Thomas. We need to go. Thomas and I gotta move on. We made our way toward the door that we knew led to the stairwell. I grabbed the handle and threw it open. Only, it didn't lead to the stairs. I found myself staring at another hallway. I groaned under my breath, then shut the door. How much you wanna bet that's not the top floor? I said. We gotta get the fuck out of this building, Thomas said. I heard movement behind us. I turned and looked down the hallway we were in, where I saw one of Dagon's Cthulhu-like drones. I turned to Thomas. Run! I shouted. One of these things had already been responsible for the death of a horseman. I was not about to try and tussle with it. We took off, sprinting down another hallway. The drone didn't really give chase. The hallway led us to a corner. We came to a dead stop when we rounded it. The drone was standing there, waiting for us. I was wary of any psychic attacks. Abel and Kane had warded our helmets, but I'd remembered being stuck in a trance in Spain. Thomas raised his hands and sent a wave of lightning at the drone. This lightning did absolutely nothing, aside from make the world smell like burnt fish. The drone blitzed forward, his hand collapsing Thomas by his throat and lifting him up into the air. I reared back and thrust my sword into the drone's chest. The blade sizzled through the flesh, but the octopus's inky black eyes only looked down at me. He snapped Thomas's neck before backhanding me into the wall. I cratered it hard, hitting the floor and getting to my hands and knees. I could see Thomas's body limp on the ground. I looked up at the drone, who reached down for me, only for his hand to be lopped off by a scythe. It roared as it stumbled backward. Abel pulled me to my feet. His armor was covered in blood. He had a deathly look on his face. "I'm tired of dealing with you monstrosities," Abel spit as he charged forward. The drone was quickly on the defensive, as Abel's onslaught was endless. He cut the thing down in seconds. I stumbled a bit before a hand collapsed onto my shoulder. Holding me in place, I turned to find Marcus standing there, Wukong and Royce behind him. "Where's Sirs?" I asked. "Helping Megan with the warding." "How'd you guys get up here so fast?" I asked. Marcus snapped his fingers. A blue stone that was maybe the size of a basketball hovered over his hand. "What is that?" "Master Key. I won it in a multiversal fighting tournament." "Like in Dragon Ball Z?" I asked. "No, it was closer to Mortal Kombat," Wukong replied from behind him. "Now, let's go. Abel can handle this." Marcus snapped his fingers. I was suddenly standing in the main office, formerly the office of Victor Marx, the same office I'd killed 9 people outside of because a fly had landed on my suit. There is a long story there. I've told it before. The office was a mess now. The windows were all blown out. There was blood all over the floor. Michael was kneeling over Owen's comatose body. Lucifer was busy looking over the bodies of the GSF soldiers that had been piled up in the corner. I watched him for a second as he grabbed one and yanked it from the pile. He then grabbed the dead soldier's hand and placed his foot on the accompanying shoulder. Then he ripped the arm off. He looked up at me and smiled as he placed the arm onto his stump. He looked at it for a moment or two. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of spell he used, but the dead arm was attached now. It functioned like a regular arm would. Lucifer then walked over to Owen. "He's stable, but yeah, Dagon's psychic mind spell bullshit. Here." Lucifer lifted a finger. It ignited with an orange flame. He put it to Owen's forehead, but Michael caught it. "If you try anything." Lucifer scowled at him. "He's my son." Michael begrudgingly let go. Lucifer tapped Owen on the head, and he suddenly took a deep inhale. He breathed heavily for a moment as his eyes locked onto Michael. "Mike?" he asked. "Hey kid. What are you doing here? Where's Angie?" Then Owen noticed the wings on Michael's back. "Holy shit," he said. Then he noticed his father. "Holy shit," he said as he reflexively started to scoot back. I could tell that Lucifer was torn between finding this hilarious and being a little hurt. "It's okay," Michael said. "He helped us save you." Owen eyed Lucifer for a second. Lucifer shrugged. "Where's Dagon?" I asked. "Not here." The battle raged on the ground below us. I could hear the roar of the guns on Miguel's suit.
"We can't hold it off,"
a voice called out on comms. I walked to the window. The massive creature was impervious to the exterminator's small arms fire. They were quickly being overwhelmed. "We need to get down there," I said. "No, I'll do it," Michael said as he ignited his sword. He turned to Owen and then me. "Kill this thing," he said as he stepped off the building. I watched him as he flew down in a blur of white light and collided with the mass of tendrils and teeth. The monstrosity was sent tumbling into a building, completely collapsing it. Michael raised his blade to the sky. A white beam of energy shot forth into the clouds. My eyes caught something lowering itself. My heart fluttered as what I can only describe as an eyeball with 6 angelic wings came forth. The eyeball glowing white hot as a beam of energy came forth, nailing the kaiju and causing it to tumble backward even more. "The Seraphim. That thing packs a punch," Lucifer said. The Seraphim was the same size as Michael. It lowered itself down next to Michael as the beast they were fighting recovered. I turned to Owen, then to Abel, who entered the room with the head of the drone in one hand. "Where's Dagon?" he demanded. "We don't know. He's not on the scanners." "Oh, the scanners that missed all the creatures and warding in the building? How surprising. Anyone think the writing here got a major downgrade?" Chad said. "Fuck you talking about?" asked Ken as he walked in behind Abel. Megan and Circe were with him. "He'll come for us. We have something he wants," Lucifer said. That was when Dagon suddenly appeared right behind him. Lucifer turned quickly, his fist raised to strike. Dagon caught it and twisted his arm behind him. He looked at us from over Lucifer's shoulder. "Hello, Father," he whispered in Lucifer's ear. I pulled the spear tip from my back with my free hand. The whole room had kind of formed a semicircle around Dagon and Lucifer. He looked around at us. So many thoughts, all conflicting. His eyes locked on me. Then Owen. "I'll see you shortly," he said as he snapped his fingers. But nothing happened. My eyes widened as I turned to Marcus, who had the master key hovering over one hand, his eyes glowing blue, and his other hand aimed at Lucifer, who was glowing blue himself. Dagon hissed in rage before shoving a laughing Lucifer to the floor. He then vanished. "Marcus, get Lucifer out of here," Abel shouted. Marcus and Lucifer both vanished, the master key overpowering Michael's tethering spell. As soon as Marcus vanished, however, Dagon reappeared behind Abel, who turned quickly, swinging his scythe. Dagon caught it by its blade and drop-kicked Abel through a nearby wall. Ken fired his revolvers, but the rounds phased through Dagon, who vanished again and reappeared behind Megan and Circe. He put his hands on the backs of their heads. Both of their eyes went white. They were suddenly catatonic. Wukong made his move with his staff. Royce fired his rifle. The plasma bolts didn't hurt Dagon, who'd blocked Wukong's staff with his forearm before sending a well-timed hook into the Monkey King's jaw. Wukong was lucky to have only been knocked out. Dagon then turned his attention to the rest of us. It was me, Chad, and Owen. Dagon's eyes locked onto me. Then the spear tip. "You're the one. Why is my brother so interested in you?" I didn't reply, other than to get into a battle stance. Dagon blitzed forward, grabbing me by the throat and slamming me down so hard I went through the floor and hit the ground on the floor below us. I could hear the sounds of fighting above me. I struggled to my feet, only for Dagon to reappear in front of me. My eyes widened. Dagon grabbed me by the throat and launched me hard. I flew through a few walls and found myself in free fall outside. My world was spinning. Then everything came to a sudden stop. Something had caught me by my leg. I got my head up to see Dagon holding me and looking down. He had a look of disgust on his face. He spun me around and launched me back through the tower. I hit the ground this time, landing hard in the center of the battlefield, cratering the street below me. Everything hurt at this point. My armor was flashing warning signs on my HUD. I sat up. My body hurt bad. I could see the Devastator tearing a path through the deep ones with his cannons. I could see Michael and the Seraphim still fighting the kaiju. I really needed his help. I groaned again, then looked up as a shadow cast over me. Dagon stood there. He stomped on me. I went through the road this time, landing in a flooded subway tunnel with a splash, my HUD going crazy at this point. I found myself in waist-deep water when I stood up. One of my ankles was sprained or maybe even broken. I struggled to walk. I'd lost my sword, but I'd managed to keep the spear tip. I crawled onto a dry slab of concrete. That was when I heard the splash behind me. I turned. Dagon was walking toward me through the water. "Fuck," I groaned as I pulled a grenade and threw it at him. He merely walked through the explosion. I got to my feet as he approached, ready with the spear tip. He teleported onto the slab. I brought the spear down onto him, but he caught my wrist and snapped it. Then he drove his other fist into my helmet. I felt everything go black for a second. Then I could feel the air on my face. They say you have a destiny. They say you're part of the cosmic cycle. I am unimpressed, he growled as he hit my helmet again. I could see his face now, smell his breath. The gash in my helmet revealed more than half my face. He then ripped my helmet off and tossed me to the floor. You wanna know what destiny is? I had a destiny once. I was going to be the Black Messiah, the herald of Lucifer and Lilith's dark god. Then they changed their minds. They changed their minds and cut me off from Amonu's voice. They cut me off and abandoned me. He put his foot on my chest. I could hear everyone else's thoughts though, everyone in the multiverse. I could hear their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their prayers. I hear everything. I heard my father tell you how to kill me. I heard every conversation ever had about me, about how I was this malevolent monster, how it was my destiny to destroy the world for Amonu. He pressed down hard on my chest plate. I found myself struggling to breathe. Destiny is a lie, Trent. It's a fable. The multiverse is cruel. Life is cruel. Heaven is cruel. Hell is barbaric. I will fix it. He pressed down harder, then released me as he turned to grab something. I took a sharp inhale. You're right, I said as I spit up some blood. Dagon held the spear tip. Then he sneered down at me. Destiny is a lie. You can choose what you want to be. You still chose to be a monster. Dagon considered this for a moment. A monster, Trent Grayson. To the average GSF soldier, Nemesis is a monster. It's all a matter of perspective. The ground around us shook as the battle above us raged on. My comms were disabled, so I didn't know if help was coming. I wondered why Dagon hadn't killed me yet. I pulled my pistol with my remaining good hand and fired it at Dagon. He only stared at me like he was bored. Tell me you've got something better than that. That was when an arrow caught him in the shoulder and exploded. My eyes went skyward, where Loxley stood at the hole with his bow raised. Dagon sneered as he looked up, only to be decked in the back of the head by a black flaming fist. He fell forward and landed in the water, Owen standing on the slab where he had been. Owen looked up at Loxley. Marcus arrived next to me. He was on one knee. "Where's the spear?" he asked. I looked at him in confusion. But there was a splash. Dagon emerged from the water, his back covered in writhing black tendrils, his eyes black. He roared at us. Marcus pulled his sword. Owen closed his eyes and put his hands together. He said some kind of chant, and suddenly he pulled the black flaming twilight blade out of thin air. I can remember wondering where the hell he'd learned to do that, but I didn't have time. Dagon was upon the two quick, taking arrows as he charged. Owen and Marcus engaged. The fight was intense. Tendrils flew everywhere. Marcus blocked several and cut several more. Owen did the same, firing off plumes of black fire straight at Dagon's face. I looked around the water. They couldn't kill him without the spear. "Where are you?" I wondered. My whole body was in intense pain, but I pushed myself, feeling around the murky water as the battle raged, hoping to God that Dagon had dropped it. I just couldn't find it. That is, until my hand hit something metal. I picked it up, turning just in time to see Owen being choked by a tendril. Marcus unconscious on the slab. Everything still hurt. But I wasn't about to let the fight end like this. I charged in, raising the knife high above my head. Dagon's back was turned to me. I sloshed through the water, 10 feet away from the target, then 5, then 2. Then a sharp pain entered my gut. I could feel the tendril writhing around in my stomach. It had gone straight through my armor. Dagon turned to me with a sneer. I lowered the blade. "Behold, your new destiny," he growled. Owen raised a hand and let off a swath of black flame that hit Dagon in the back of his head. Dagon growled as he turned back to Owen. That was the momentary distraction. The window I needed. I thrust the blade with my remaining strength, the tip making its way into the side of Dagon's throat. A look of surprised panic overtook his face as his hand shot to his neck. He stumbled back a few steps. Then, his eyes found me with the blade raised. Blood was still pouring from my stomach as his tendril snaked out. I stumbled forward as he fell back onto the slab. I fell on top of him and raised the Spear of Destiny. I felt so weak, but I had to finish the job. I thought of Ophelia, of my siblings, of my unborn child. I'd never know if it was a boy or a girl, but at least it would live. "Behold," I barked. "Your new destiny." I brought the spear tip down hard. It entered Dagon's eye socket with a wet squelch. There was a bright flash of light. Dagon screeched so loud, my ears bled. Then, everything went silent. I fell off of him and onto the slab, where Marcus was trying to get up. He noticed me and his eyes went large. I looked up at him and let off a soft chuckle. He fell to a knee next to me. Owen did as well. My hearing went out then. Everything went black. I suddenly found myself in a whited out room. I looked around. It was less of a room and more of a void. It was almost empty, other than the older man sitting in a rocking chair. He'd seemingly appeared out of nowhere. I approached him cautiously. The rocking chair moved back and forth gently. "Hey, Trent," he said softly. "Am I dead?" I asked. "No, not yet," he said. "Am I dreaming?" He smiled as he looked up at me. He had kind, yet sad eyes. He took a deep breath. "Not exactly, and before you ask, yes, I am." "Why are you speaking to me?" "You just did something significant. You killed Dagon. You saved the world. But you've also put it in grave danger at the same time." "What do you mean?" "The spear, it had a power draining spell on it. One that gave Dagon's power to another. Another with even more nefarious plans. Someone that you need to stop." "Who?" I asked. "Abaddon." The old man took a deep breath. "I'm not going to lie, it's going to be a hard path. People you love are going to die. Destiny is." Dagon called it a lie. I can't say I disagree. The man laughed softly. "Destiny is like the flow of water. It can be guided or damped shut before it reaches its destination." "And what is my destination?" I asked. "Ultimately, you're going to have to make a choice. A choice that's going to hurt." He stood up and tapped me on the forehead. I was suddenly standing on a battlefield. There were bodies surrounding me on a beach. I looked around. I recognized some of the bodies. My heart jumped into my throat. I could see Grace with her entrails ripped from her stomach. Aisha's headless body. Chad was crawling away with a trail of blood behind him. Wukong was dead. I could see the armored corpses of the Green Knights, dead members of the Ninth. The Devastator armor had a massive hole in his chest where Miguel's blood drenched the cockpit. I walked along the beach, listening for the sound of battle. There were swords clanking. There I found more bodies. Marcus had his throat slit. Megan was cradling Ken's lifeless body. Then, I found the red-skinned humanoid with 2 massive dragon-like wings pulling a sword from Owen's intestines. "No!" I bellowed. Aberon turned to me and smiled before dropping Owen's lifeless corpse to the beach. "Trent, why so sad? None of this would have been possible without you." I stumbled my words. My breath caught in my throat. Then, a voice rang out from behind me. "This is but a possibility," the man said as he stopped next to me. "You said I have to make a choice. What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I can't tell you, but you'll know the moment. I have faith that you can end the cycle," he said. I turned to him. "And what cycle?" Things suddenly went black again. I found myself in agonizing pain as my arms and legs screamed. I grunted, then felt something poking my face. Was that a finger? I opened my eyes. Chad was standing there with a finger in my face. A look of bewilderment and excitement plastered across his. I could hear the heart monitor go off. "Holy shit, dude. You made it!" I mean, it was touch and go there for a moment. But thank God. I thought I was gonna have to raise your kid. "Why were you poking my face?" I asked weakly, my eyes catching my arm, which was in a cast. "I was bored." "Where's Ophelia?" I asked. Chad turned around, where Ophelia was passed out in the chair behind him. "She hasn't left your room. You want me to wake her up?" "No," I said. "Let them sleep." The recovery process was a long one. I'd been stabbed in the intestines, had my wrist snapped, my ankle fractured, several broken ribs, then a concussion to top it all off, combined with a few lacerated organs, and I was actually lucky to be alive. The recovery process was a long one. It was helped by the Omega serum in my veins, and Megan doing some light healing spells. I missed the funeral for Thomas, as I'd been in the hospital for 3 months. His death had a galvanizing effect on the population of Atlantis. The whole event had. Atlantis as a nation was no longer high in the sky, and everyone knew it wouldn't be long before they were discovered. Their suffering was only just beginning. That brings me to my next topic. Owen. Owen would take some time away from the ISDD. Lucifer voluntarily went back to his cell, on the condition that Owen comes and visits him. I agreed to this, with the stipulation that they'd be under supervision at all times. Lucifer was still Lucifer after all. Owen would also have to have a long talk with Michael, who just happened to be the father of Owen's half-sister, Angelica. They're both good kids, but that family's got some major issues. They'd go stay with their mom and Michael in a cabin in Montana for a few weeks. Which brings me to Valentine. 4 months later, I sat in her office. Ophelia sat next to me with an engagement ring on her left hand. My wrist was still in a cast. Valentine had a sour demeanor about her that morning. She rubbed her temples as she looked down at the file. I knew why she was frustrated, but I also knew that when it came to Dagon, it couldn't have been avoided. "The president's pissed," she said. "Why? It wasn't on American soil," Ophelia replied. "Thousands still died. He wants to hang the ISDD out to dry." I took a deep breath. I had been on death's doorstep. We'd lost good men. And for what? Some dumbass in a suit to try and frame us as the bad guys? "I'm guessing that there are other influences at play here as well," I said. Valentine smiled. "You're very perceptive." I eyed Ophelia. "I think it's time we do something about Gideon. What about you?" "I agree." I'd been doing a lot of thinking on my time healing, about Stein giving me the spear. I wondered what kind of connection Stein had with Aberon. Was he a son? A younger brother maybe? I wasn't sure. I did know that Stein was powerful. I knew that he wanted us to use the spear on Dagon. I knew that we had to take him out if we were ever gonna get Gideon off of us. Valentine would tell us that the US government was going to call for us to be labeled as a terrorist organization. But she was fairly sure that it was going to take some work and some time to try and get that done. We thanked her and left. When we arrived back at base, we found Kane waiting for us with Loxley, Marcus, and Abel. Kane was looking over the scroll his son had given us. Kane had a smile on his face. Abel and Marcus seemed overly serious. "I'm gonna make a wild assumption here and say that you're not here to check up on me," I said. Kane held up the letter. "I wish Crowley had made contact sooner." "Why? What's in the letter?" I asked. "It's the name of a cult in upstate New York. It's also a list of families who are involved," Abel said. I raised a brow at him. "A cult? Put them on the list of millions of others. What makes them special?" "According to Crowley, they're summoning demons to possess their flock. I'd imagine not for anything good, especially if Crowley is passing information to me about it," Kane said. "What's this cult called?" asked Ophelia. "The Apollyon Guild," Marcus said sternly. I nodded as I considered this for a minute. I wondered about the path ahead. I wondered about destiny. The old man in my vision had told me I was gonna have to make a choice. I wondered what it would be. He said I was going to lose people I loved. I wondered which ones. He said we needed to stop Abaddon. But how? Abaddon now had the powers of Dagon as well as his own. It was a terrifying thought. We needed to be smart about this, about everything we did. Marcus and Abel knew of my vision. They theorized I'd spoken with Yahweh. But Father Time had been adamant that it was a hallucination, as Yahweh doesn't directly interfere with humanity anymore. Not since the crucifixion. I wasn't sure. I just knew that there was a fight ahead of us. A long and hard one. The only thing we could really do was keep pushing.